Okay, deep breath. Cleansing breath. A Princess of Mars. We started reading this midstream last Monday. We finished... Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And we had a little bit more time to go, so we started reading A Princess of Mars. And we read the first 3 chapters, and my goodness, if that wasn't just a hop back in time to an incredibly racist moment in American history. You got a lyric? Go ahead, Rar. Thank you for the lyric, friend. And the talk, yeah. Good luck with your own stuff. Yes. So the first 3 chapter illuminated, like I said, like a very cowboys and Indians racist vibe throughout the whole thing. And towards the end of the 3rd chapter, our hero, which we thought was the guy from Terminator for a little while, but it's definitely not. He was prospecting. I think they lost the war in the South, to the Civil War, and he started prospecting with a friend of his from the military. They found a rich vein, and one of them had to go back and register the land, and the other one had to stay there and protect it from other prospectors, because everyone is peaceful, cooperative, and honest. And unfortunately, they were waylaid by some Native Americans, whom they constantly referred to as Indians, as though they didn't know that we've had an enlightenment since then. And he was killed. His partner was killed. He was chased up into the mountains and found a funky-ass little cave with paralyzing smoke and an odd sound in the back that scared off the Native Americans when they saw it. So much so that one of them accidentally threw himself off a cliff trying to get away. The night passed, the morning dawned, and he managed to, through sheer will, stand up, but his body was still upon the ground. He walked outside. I guess not thinking to even look back behind him, he said he didn't know what was back there, and he wouldn't know for the next 10 years. This is a bit of a flashback story. He went outside, and he saw Mars upon the horizon, in the sky just above it. He looked at it really hard, stretched out his hand, and all of a sudden, there he was. Naked as the day he was born, by the way. He didn't take his clothes with him. So I guess this is supposed to be some version of astral travel or something. I'm not sure. He felt physical to himself, though. So I think, I'm not really sure what the hell's going on there. Maybe we'll find out one day. Maybe we won't. But he ended up upon Mars. He found a little nest of little green lizardy type alien folk. Mind you, not the most hostile alien lizards we've ever come across. Yes, they had weapons and they were shocked, and he could leap a tall building in a single panicked bound, which caused him a lot of trouble for moving around. So apparently the gravity of Mars is much, much less than Earth, possibly much, much less than the moon in this story. Yet the atmosphere, although thin, didn't cause him problems. Valana speculated that he was used to mountain air, so perhaps it was just mountain thin air. So there you go. All discrepancies accounted for, probably. The captain of the little patrol that had come up behind him when he was looking at the little hatchery, the little green doohickers, he was a wiser captain, supposedly. They couldn't speak the same language, but he understood that he was interesting, if not a danger. So offered him a arm bracelet or something. He accepted it, and they walked off. They walked off into the dusk of the 3rd chapter. I think that's where we're going to start here in just a moment. Got to find where my stuff and things are. Oh, good, I shut down. Do I have like a history too or something? Come on, Vivaldi, save my ass. Bookmarks, downloads, history. I have work tabs, and I think I just closed and reopened everything, and that, of course, does not include the story, because the story... Here we go, Princess from Mars. Okay. No, it reloaded as I clicked it. God damn it. Oh, I can search. Here we go. A princess. Open in new tab. There we go. I don't need to have multiple channels of everybody else open. Holy crap, I have got a lot of people open. Holy moly. And there, and there, and there. Okay. Oh, and we need to go to dark mode, or I will go blind. Do I have links on here? There are links. Oh, thank goodness. Sorry, I am woefully unprepared, apparently. To this. Okay, chapter 4, right? Let's just double check. Exchange a few words with them. Yeah. Okay, so the fellow designated reached down 2 or 3 hands. Yeah, they all have like 6 limbs, 2 legs and 4 arms. Although the middle arms could be legs too, apparently. Okay. Chapter 4, A Prisoner. Just double hit a chapter marker. Gonna delete that. We had gone perhaps 10 miles when the ground began to rise very rapidly. We were, as I was later to learn, nearing the edge of one of Mars's long dead seas, the bottom of which my encounter with the Martians had taken place. In a short time we gained the foot of the mountains, and after traversing a narrow gorge, came to an open valley, the far extremity of which was a low tableland, upon which I beheld an enormous city. Toward this we galloped, entering it by what appeared to be a ruined roadway leading out from the city, but only to the edge of the tableland, where it ended abruptly in a flight of broad steps. Upon closer observation, I saw as we passed them that the buildings were deserted, and while not greatly decayed, had the appearance of not having been tenanted for years, possibly for ages. That's quite a sturdy construction, then. Toward the center of the city was a large plaza, and upon this, and in the buildings immediately surrounding it, were camped some 900 or 1,000 creatures of the same breed as my captors, for such I now considered them, despite the suave manner in which I had been trapped. With the exception of their ornaments, all were naked. The women varied in appearance but little from the men, except that their tusks were much larger in proportion to their height, in some instances curving nearly to their high-set ears. Their bodies were smaller and lighter in color, and their fingers and toes bore the rudiments of nails, which were entirely lacking among the males. The adult females ranged in height from 10 to 12 feet. Oh, that's quite large. The children were light in color, even lighter than the women, and all looked precisely alike to me, except that some were taller than others, older, I presumed. I saw no signs of extreme age among them, nor is there any appreciable difference in their appearance from the age of maturity, about 40, until at about the age of 1,000 years. They go voluntarily upon their last strange pilgrimage down the river Is, which leads no living Martian knows whither, and from whose bosom no Martian has ever returned, or would be allowed to live did he return after once embarking upon its cold, dark waters. There's a lot of twisting in and around. Oh, Valena, 80 stream streak. One day you're going to have a record, I just know it. Like a Twitch-wide record. No one's going to beat you on my streams, I don't think. Only about 1 Martian in 1,000 dies of sickness or disease, and possibly about 20 take the voluntary pilgrimage. I suppose that's per year. The other 979 die violent deaths in duels, in hunting, in aviation, and in war. But perhaps by far the greatest death loss comes during the age of childhood, when vast numbers of the little Martians fall victims to the great white apes of Mars. So that started off on a really good note. You don't die from sickness or disease. Oh, great, your technology and medicine must be fantastic. No, you just die too much in war. It's worse. Oh, I pulled out my socks. The average life expectancy of a Martian after the age of maturity is about 300 years, but would be near the 1,000 mark were it not for the various means leading to violent death. Owing to, to be honest, 300 years means you survive a lot of violence, or you don't actually have that much violence at all. Just because your species lives a lot longer doesn't mean war cares. You don't die slower from a bullet wound just because everyone around you has the potential to live longer. Owing to the waning resources of the planet, it evidently became necessary to counteract the increasing longevity which the remarkable skill in therapeutics and surgery produced. And so human life has come to be considered but lightly on Mars, as is evidenced by their dangerous sports and the almost continual warfare between the various communities. We have remarkable skill in therapeutics and surgery. So to counteract these life-saving practices, we're going to murder one another. They make war because bored. Play football. Fuck. Jesus. I guess, given the context of the characters, where they're from, that kind of makes more sense. War would just seem like a natural part of what they're doing, I guess. Maybe I'm thinking and saying that because of the book we read before. The book titles. All Quiet on the Western Front. Those kids in the army, they knew nothing but war. What else could they do but have war and die misery? It's just what their life was. There are other and natural causes tending toward the diminution of population, but nothing contributes so greatly to this end as the fact that no male or female Martian is ever voluntarily without a weapon of destruction. Yeah, the protag is a Civil War general. That's kind of where I was coming from that too. What else would he know? As we neared the plaza and my presence was discovered, we were immediately surrounded by hundreds of the creatures who seemed anxious to pluck me from my seat behind my guard. A word from the leader of the party stilled their clamor, and we proceeded at a trot across the plaza to the entrance. Oh dear. Sorry, sneezing. Brutal. Where were we? Oh. And we proceeded at a trot across the plaza to the entrance of as magnificent an edifice as mortal eye has rested upon. The building was low but covered an enormous area. It was constructed of gleaming white marble inlaid with gold and brilliant stones which sparkled and scintillated in the sunlight. The main entrance was some 100 feet in width and projected from the building proper to form a huge canopy above the entrance hall. There was no stairway, but a gentle incline to the first floor of the building opened into an enormous chamber encircled by galleries. On the floor in this chamber, which was dotted with highly carved wooden desks and chairs, were assembled about 40 or 50 male Martians around the steps of a rostrum. On the platform proper squatted an enormous warrior heavily loaded with metal ornaments, gay-colored feathers, and beautifully wrought leather trappings ingeniously set with precious stones. From his shoulders depended a short cape of white fur lined with brilliant scarlet silk. What struck me as most remarkable about this assemblage and the hall in which they were congregated was the fact that these creatures were entirely out of proportion to the desks, chairs, and other furnishings, these being of a size adapted to human beings such as I, whereas the great bulks of the Martians could scarcely have squeezed into the chairs, nor was there room beneath the desks for their long legs. Evidently, then, there were other denizens of Mars than the wild and grotesque creatures into whose hands I had fallen, but the evidences of extreme antiquity which showed all around me indicated that these buildings might have belonged to some long extinct and forgotten race in the dim antiquity of Mars. If they're long extinct, like they would have replaced the furniture, right? That's kind of where my brain goes. A little weird. Our party had halted at the entrance to the building, and at a sign from the leader I had been lowered to the ground. Again, locking his arm in mine, we had proceeded into the audience chamber. There were few formalities observed in approaching the Martian chieftain. My captor merely strode up to the rostrum, the others making way for him as he advanced. The chieftain rose to his feet and uttered the name of my escort, who, in turn, halted and repeated the name of the ruler, followed by his title. At the time, this ceremony and the words they uttered meant nothing to me, but later I came to know that this was the customary greeting between green Martians. Had the men been strangers and therefore unable to exchange names, they would have silently exchanged ornaments. Had their missions been peaceful, otherwise they would have exchanged shots or have fought out their introduction with some other of their various weapons. My captor, whose name was Tars Tarkas, was virtually the vice chieftain of the community, and a man of great ability as a statesman and warrior. He evidently explained briefly the incidents connected with his expedition, including my capture, and when he had concluded, the chieftain addressed me at some length. I replied in our good old English tongue, merely to convince him that neither of us could understand the other, but I noticed that when I smiled slightly on concluding, he did likewise. Hello, Queen. Thank you for the lurk. This fact and the similar occurrence during my first talk with Tarkas convinced me that we had at least something in common, the ability to smile, therefore to laugh, denoting a sense of humor. But I was to learn that the Martian smile is merely perfunctory, and that the Martian laugh is a thing to cause strong men to blanch in horror. The ideas of humor among the green men of Mars are widely at variance with our conceptions of incitants to merriment. With our conceptions of incitants. No, I hate this word. You know what I'm going to do? I'm not even going to look it up. We're just going to cancel it. Right, I shortened a canceled word. There. It's no longer a word. It's been removed from the lexicon of humanity. It's no longer permitted for use. The ideas of humor among the green men of Mars are widely at variance with our conceptions of things that cause merriment. The death agonies of a fellow being are, to these strange creatures, provocative of the wildest hilarity, while their chief form of commonest amusement is to inflict death upon their prisoners of war in various ingenious and horrible ways. Oh, they're Nazis. The assembled warriors and chieftains examined me closely, feeling my muscles and the texture of my skin. The principal chieftain then evidently signified a desire to see me perform, and, Motioning me to follow, he started with Tartarkas for the open plaza. Now, I had made no attempt to walk. Poor word. No, it's not a word anymore, Valana. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Now, I had made no attempt to walk. Since my first signal failure, except while tightly grasping Tars Tarkas' arms, and so now I went skipping and flitting about among the desks and chairs like some monstrous grasshopper. After bruising myself severely, much to the amusement of the Martians, I again had recourse to creeping. But this did not suit them, and I was roughly jerked to my feet by a towering fellow who had laughed almost heartily at my misfortunes. As he banged me down upon my feet, his face was bent close to mine, and I did the only thing a gentleman might do under the circumstances of brutally boorish and lack of consideration for a stranger's rights. I swung my fist squarely to his jaw, and he went down like a felled ox. As he sunk to the floor, I wheeled around with my back toward the nearest desk, expecting to be overwhelmed by the vengeance of his fellows, but determined to give them as good a battle as the unequal odds would permit before I gave up my life. We're going to do ads right before the fisticuffs. Yes, they're coming up soon. We're going to get them out of the way. See you in 3 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Our hero had just punched a Martian in the face. Here we go. Back against the desk. My fears were groundless, damn it. However, as the other Martians, at first struck dumb with wonderment, finally broke into wild peals of laughter and applause. I did not recognize the applause as such, but later, when I had become acquainted with their customs, I learned that I had won what they seldom accord, a manifestation of approbation. Approbation. They clapped. The fellow whom I had struck lay where he had fallen, nor did any of his mates approach him. Tars Tarkas advanced towards me, holding out one of his arms, and we thus proceeded to the plaza without further mishap. I did not, of course, know the reason for which we had come to the open, but I was not long in being enlightened. They first repeated the word "suck" a number of times, and then Tars Tarkas made several jumps, repeating the same word before each leap. Turning to me, he said, "Suck." I saw what they were after, and gathering myself together, I sucked. He sucked. With such marvelous success that I cleared a good 150 feet. Nor did I this time lose my equilibrium, but landed squarely upon my feet without falling. I then returned by easy jumps of 25 or 30 feet to the little group of warriors. My exhibition had been witnessed by several hundred lesser Martians, and they immediately broke into demands for a repetition, which the chieftain then ordered me to make. But I was both hungry and thirsty, and determined on the spot that my only method of salvation was to demand the consideration from these creatures which they evidently would not voluntarily accord. I therefore ignored the repeated commands to suck, and each time they were made, I motioned to my mouth and rubbed my stomach. Tars Tarkas and the chieftain exchanged a few words, and the former, calling to a young female among the throng, gave her some instructions and motioned me to accompany her. I grasped her proffered arm, and together we crossed the plaza toward a large building on the far side. My fair companion was about 8 feet tall, having just arrived at maturity, but not yet to her full height. She was of a light olive green color, with a smooth, glossy hide. Her name, as I afterward learned, was Sola, and she belonged to the retinue of Tars Tarkas. She conducted me to a spacious chamber in one of the buildings fronting on the plaza, and which, from the litter of silks and furs upon the floor, I took to be the sleeping quarters of several of the natives. The room was well lighted by a number of large windows and was beautifully decorated with mural paintings and mosaics. But upon all there seemed to rest that indefinable touch of the finger of antiquity which convinced me that the architects and builders of these wondrous creations had nothing in common with the crude half-brutes which now occupied them. Sola motioned me to be seated upon a pile of silks near the center of the room, and turning, made a peculiar hissing sound, as though signaling to someone in an adjoining room. In response to her call, I obtained my first sight of a new Martian wonder. It waddled in on its 10 short legs and squatted down before the girl like an obedient puppy. The thing was about the size of a Shetland pony, but its head bore a slight resemblance to that of a frog, except that the jaws were equipped with 3 rows of long, sharp tusks. Chapter 5. I Elude My Watchdog. Sola stared into the brute's wicked-looking eyes, muttering a word or two of command, pointed to me, and left the chamber. I could not but wonder what this ferocious-looking monstrosity might do when left alone in such close proximity to such a relatively tender morsel of meat, but my fears were groundless, as the beast, after surveying me intently for a moment, crossed the room to the only exit which led to the street, and lay down full length across the threshold. This was my first experience with a Martian watchdog, but it was destined not to be my last, for this fellow guarded me carefully during the time I remained a captive among these green men, twice saving my life, and never voluntarily being away from me for a moment. So it's a good puppy. A good puppy dog. While Solon was away, I took occasion to examine more minutely the room in which I found myself captive. It says captive a lot, but really he's a guest from what we've seen so far, to be perfectly honest. What else was he going to do upon getting here? The mural painting depicted scenes of rare and wonderful beauty. Mountains, rivers, lake, ocean, meadow, trees and flowers, winding roadways and sun-kissed gardens, scenes which might have portrayed earthly views but for the different colorings of the vegetation. The work had evidently been wrought by a master hand, so subtle the atmosphere, so perfect the technique. Yet nowhere was there a representation of a living animal, either human or brute, by which I could guess at the likeness of these other and perhaps extinct denizens of Mars. While I was allowing my fancy to run riot in the wild conjecture on the possible explanation of these strange anomalies which I had so far met with on Mars, Sola returned bearing both food and drink. These she placed on the floor beside me, and, seating herself a short ways off, regarded me intently. The food consisted about of a pound of some solid substance of the consistency of cheese and almost tasteless, while the liquid was apparently milk from some animal. It was not unpleasant to the taste, though slightly acid, and I leaned in a short time to prize it very highly. I learned in a short time to prize it very highly. It came, as I later discovered, not from an animal, as there is only one mammal on Mars, and that one very rare indeed. But I guess that's him. But from a large plant which grows practically without water, but seems to distill its plentiful supply of milk from the products of the soil, the moisture of the air, and the rays of the sun. A single plant of this species will give 8 or 10 quarts of milk per day. That's a lot. Those roots must go deep. After I had eaten, I was greatly invigorated, but feeling the need of rest, I stretched out upon the silks and was soon asleep. I must have slept several hours, as it was dark when I awoke, and I was very cold. I noticed that someone had thrown a fur over me, but it had become partially lodged, and in the darkness I could not see to replace it. Suddenly a hand reached out and pulled the fur over me, shortly afterwards adding another to my covering. I presumed that my watchful guardian was Sola, nor was I wrong. This girl alone among all the green Martians with whom I came in contact disclosed characteristics of sympathy, kindliness, and affection. Her ministrations to my bodily wants were unfailing, and her solicitude. Oh my goodness, I am not a good reader tonight. Her solicitude. Her solicitude. Nope, I hate that word. We're going to ignore it. I'm not going to ban 2 words in one night, though. Her care saved me from much suffering and many hardships. Solicitous. It's Solicitous. So, I want the C to be a sound, but it could be her solicitous. Her solicitous care. She's very solicity. I am highly amused. Okay, adjust my chair again. Don't sigh at me. The emote works in Twitch still. It's just not Discord. As I was to learn, the Martian nights are extremely cold. I guess like a desert. And as there is practically no twilight or dawn, the changes in temperature are sudden and most uncomfortable, as are the transitions from brilliant daylight to darkness. The nights are either brilliantly illuminated or illumined or very dark. For if neither of the 2 moons of Mars happen to be in the sky, almost total darkness results, since the lack of atmosphere, or rather the very thin atmosphere, fails to diffuse the starlight to any great extent. On the other hand, if both of the moons are in the heavens at night, the surface of the ground is brightly illuminated. Do they not have lights? Maybe they should have illumination via artificial means. Both of Mars's moons are vastly nearer her than is our moon to Earth, the nearer moon being about 5,000 miles distant, while the further is but little more than 14,000 miles away. That's freaking close. Is that actually true? Wouldn't that wreck the surface? How far are Mars's moons? The 2 moons are Phobos and Deimos. They are irregular in shape. Both were discovered by American astronomer blah 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 and are named after blah 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 blah. Don't care. Tricky Wikipedia. Save me, Wikipedia. Very small. They're very tiny. Maybe that's why it's not a big deal. Yeah, Deimos measures like 12.6 kilometers across. And Phobos is like 22 kilometers across. Phobos orbits closer to Mars with a semi-major axis of 9,300 kilometers and an orbital period of 7.6 hours. Damn, it's zipping. Deimos orbits further with a semi-axis major of 23.4 thousand kilometers and a 30-hour period. Damn. The moons are zipping along, that's for sure. But yeah, close enough. It's in miles, so that was about right. 5,000 miles, while the further one is little more than 14,000 miles away, against the nearly 250,000 miles which separate us from our moon. The near moon of Mars makes a complete revolution about the planet in a little over 7½ hours, so that she may be seen hurtling through the sky like some huge meteor 2 or 3 times each night, revealing all her phases during each transit of the heavens. That would be really cool to see. I think they should, like, what is it? The Explorer on what Pathfinder, is that still operating? That's the one on Mars, right? Are there 2? They should point that thing skyward. I want to see them suckers racing across the sky. The further moon revolves about Mars in something over 30¼ hours, and with her sister satellite making a nocturnal Martian scene one of splendid and weird grandeur. And it is well that nature has so graciously and abundantly lighted the Martian night, for the green men of Mars, being a nomadic race without high intellectual development, have but crude means for artificial lighting, depending principally upon torches, a kind of candle, and a peculiar oil lamp which generates a gas and burns without a wick. Interesting, burning without a wick. I'm not sure how that works. This last device produces an intensely brilliant, far-reaching white light, but as the natural oil which it requires can only be obtained by mining in one of several widely separated and remote localities, it is seldom used by these creatures whose only thought is for today, and whose hatred for manual labor has kept them in a semi-barbaric state for countless ages. After Sola had replenished my coverings, I again slept. Nor did I awaken until daylight. The other occupants of the room, 5 in number, were all females, and they were all still sleeping, piled high with a motley array of silks and furs. Across the threshold lay stretched the sleepless guardian brute, just as I had last seen him on the preceding day. Apparently, he had not moved a muscle. His eyes were fairly glued upon me, and I fell to wondering just what might befall me should I endeavor to escape. I have ever been prone to seek adventure, and to investigate an experiment where wiser men would have left well enough alone. It therefore now occurred to me that the surest way of learning the exact attitude of this beast toward me would be to attempt to leave the room. I felt fairly secure in my belief that I could escape him should he pursue me once I was outside the building, for I had begun to take great pride in my ability as a jumper. He's a cricket, a grasshopper indeed. Furthermore, I could see from the shortness of his legs that the brute himself was no jumper and probably no runner. Slowly and carefully, therefore, I gained my feet, only to see that my watcher did the same. Cautiously, I advanced toward him, finding that by moving with a shuffling gait, I could retain my balance as well as make reasonably rapid progress. As I neared the brute, he backed cautiously away from me, and when I had reached the open, he moved to one side to let me pass. He then fell in behind me and followed about 10 paces in my rear as I made my way along the deserted street. This chapter title lied to us. It told us we would see our protagonist escape him. Instead, it let him go. The bar is far too low. Evidently, his mission was to protect me only, I thought, but when we reached the edge of the city, he suddenly sprang before me, uttering strange sounds and baring his ugly and ferocious tusks. Thinking to have some amusement at his expense, I rushed toward him, and when almost upon him, sprang into the air, alighting far beyond him and away from the city. He wheeled instantly and charged me with the most appalling speed I had ever beheld. I had thought his short legs a bar to swiftness, but had he been coursing with greyhounds, the latter would have appeared as though asleep on a doormat. As I was to learn, this is the fleetest animal on Mars, and owing to its intelligence, Loyalty and ferocity is used in hunting, in war, and as the protector of the Martian men. Oh man. I quickly saw that I would have difficulty in escaping the fangs of the beast on a straightaway course, and so I met his charge by doubling in my tracks and leaping over him as he was almost upon me. This maneuver gave me a considerable advantage, and I was able to reach the city quite a bit ahead of him. And as he came tearing after me, I jumped for a window about 30 feet from the ground in the face of one of the buildings overlooking the valley. Grasping the sill, I pulled myself up to a sitting posture without looking into the building, and gazed down at the baffled animal beneath me. My exultation was short-lived, however, for scarcely had I gained a secure seat upon the sill than a huge hand grasped me by the neck from behind and dragged me violently into the room. Here I was thrown upon my back and beheld, standing over me, a colossal ape-like creature, white and hairless, except for an enormous shock of bristly hair upon his head. Oh. The apes of Mars, very famous creatures. Chapter 6. A fight that won friends. The thing, which more nearly resembled our earthly men than it did the Martians I had seen, held me pinioned to the ground with one huge foot, while it jabbered and gesticulated at some answering creature behind me. This other, which was evidently its mate, soon came toward us, bearing a mighty stone cudgel with which it evidently intended to brain me. The creatures were about 10 or 15 feet tall, standing erect, and these creatures on Mars are massive. I guess it's because the gravity thing that he explained it away that way. And had, like the green Martians, an intermediary set of arms or legs, midway between their upper and lower limbs. Their eyes were close together and non-protruding. Their ears were set high, but more laterally located than those of the Martians, while their snouts and teeth were strikingly like those of our African gorilla. Altogether, they were not unlovely when viewed in comparison with the green Martians. Lower grav, yeah. The cudgel was swinging in the arc which ended upon my upturned face when a bolt of myriad-legged horror hurled itself through the doorway, full upon the breast of my executioner. With a shriek of fear, the ape which held me leaped through the open window, but its mate closed in a terrific death struggle with my preserver, which was nothing less than my faithful watch thing. I cannot bring myself to call so hideous a creature a dog. It saved your ass, bro. Maybe appreciate it a little more. As quickly as possible, I gained my feet, and backing against the wall, I witnessed such a battle as it is vouchsafed few beings to see. The strength, agility, and blind ferocity of these two creatures is approached by nothing known to earthly man. My beast had advantage in his first hold, having sunk his mighty fangs far into the breast of his adversary, but the great arms and paws of the ape, backed by muscles far transcending those of the Martian men I had seen, had locked the throat of my guardian and slowly were choking out his life, and bending back his head and neck upon his body, where I momentarily expected the former to fall limp and at the end of a broken neck. In accomplishing this, the ape was tearing away the entire front of its breast, which was held in the vice grip the vice-like grip of the powerful jaws. Back and forth upon the floor they rolled, neither one emitting a sound of fear or pain. Presently I saw the great eyes of my beast bulging completely. Bulging completely from their sockets and blood flowing from its nostrils. That he was weakening perceptibly was evident, but so also was the ape. Those struggles were growing momentarily less. Suddenly I came to myself, and, with the strange instinct which seems ever to prompt me to my duty, I seized the cudgel, which had fallen to the floor at the commencement of the battle, and swinging it with all the power of my earthly arms, I crashed it full upon the head of the ape, crushing his skull as though it had been an eggshell. Scarcely had the blow descended when I was confronted with a new danger. The ape's mate, recovered from its first shock of terror, had returned to the scene of the encounter by way of the interior of the building. I glimpsed him just before he reached the doorway, and the sight of him, now roaring as he perceived his lifeless fellow stretched upon the floor and frothing at the mouth in the extremity of his rage, filled me, I must confess, with dire forebodings. I am ever willing to stand and fight when the odds are not too overwhelmingly against me, but in this instance I perceived neither glory nor profit in pitting my relatively puny strength against the iron muscles and brutal ferocity of this enraged denizen of an unknown world. In fact, the only outcome of such an encounter, so far as I might be concerned, seemed sudden death. I was standing near the window, and I knew that once in the street I might gain the plaza in safety before the creature could overtake me. At least there was a chance for safety in flight. Against almost certain death, I should remain and fight however desperately. It is true I held the cudgel, but what could I do with it against his 4 great arms? Even should I break one of them with my first blow, for I figured that he would attempt to ward off the cudgel, he could reach out and annihilate me with the others before I could ever recover for a second attack. Just be faster, bro. In the instant that those thoughts passed through my mind, I had turned to make for the window, but my eyes alighted on the form of my erstwhile guardian. Through all thoughts of flight to the 4 winds. He lay gasping upon the floor of the chamber, his great eyes fastened upon me in what seemed a pitiful appeal for protection. I could not withstand that look, nor could I, on second thought, have deserted my rescuer without giving as good an account of myself in his behalf as he had in mine. Yes, it's also your fault he's there. Without more ado, therefore, I turned to meet the charge of the infuriated bull-ape. He was now too close upon me for the cudgel to prove of any effective assistance, so I merely threw it as heavily as I could at his advancing bulk. It struck him just below the knees, eliciting a howl of pain and rage, and so throwing him off his balance that he lunged full upon me with arms wide stretched to ease his fall. Again, as on the preceding day, I had recourse to earthly tactics, and swinging my right fist full upon the point of his chin, I followed it with a smashing left to the pit of his stomach. The effect was marvelous, for as I lightly sidestepped after delivering the second blow, he reeled and fell upon the floor, doubled up with pain and gasping for wind. Leaping over his prostrate body, I seized the cudgel and finished the monster before he could regain his feet. Perhaps the gains in gyms upon Mars do not equal the gains upon gyms of Earth. These iron muscles are perhaps not so iron. As I delivered the blow, a low laugh rang out behind me, and, turning, I beheld Tarkas, Sola, and 3 or 4 warriors standing in the doorway of the chamber. As my eyes met theirs, I was, for the second time, the recipient of their zealously guarded applause. My absence had been noted by Sola on her awakening, and she had quickly informed Tarkas, who had set out immediately with a handful of warriors to search for me. As they had approached the limits of the city, they had witnessed the actions of the bull-ape as he bolted into the building, frothing with rage. He's like Bruce Lee with the training weights removed. I guess so. Training weights. Where the hell was I? Frothing with rage. They had followed immediately behind him, thinking it barely possible that his actions might prove a clue spelled CLEW to my whereabouts and had witnessed my short but decisive battle with him. This encounter, together with my set to with the Martian warrior on the previous day and my feats of jumping, placed me upon a high pinnacle in their regard. Evidently devoid of all the finer sentiments of friendship, love, or affection, these people fairly worshipped physical prowess and bravery, and nothing is too good for the object of their adoration as long as he maintains his position by repeated examples of his skill, strength, and courage. Sola, who had accompanied the searching party of her own volition, was the only one of the Martians whose face had not been twisted in laughter as I battled for my life. She, on the contrary, was sober with apparent solicitude, and as soon as I had finished the monster, rushed to me and carefully examined my body for possible wounds or injuries. Satisfying herself that I had come off unscathed, she smiled quietly and, taking my hand, started toward the door of the chamber. She has a pet human. Tarkas and the other warriors had entered and were standing over the now rapidly reviving brute which had saved my life, and whose life I, in turn, had rescued. They seemed to be in deep argument, and finally one of them addressed me, but remembering my ignorance of his language, turned back to Tarkas, who, with a word and gesture, gave some command to the fellow and turned to follow us from the room. There seemed something menacing in their attitude toward my beast, and I hesitated to leave until I had learned the outcome. It was well I did so, for the warrior drew an evil-looking pistol from his holster and was on the point of putting an end to the creature when I sprang forward and struck up his arm. The bullet, striking the wooden casing of the window, exploded, blowing a hole completely through the wood and masonry. I then knelt down beside the fearsome-looking thing, and raising it to its feet, motioned for it to follow me. The looks of surprise which my actions elicited from the Martians were ludicrous. They could not understand, except in a feeble and childish way, such attributes as gratitude and compassion. The warrior whose gun I had struck up looked inquiringly at Tarkas, but the latter signed that I be left to my own devices. And so we returned to the plaza, with my great beast following close at heel, and Sola grasping me tightly by the arm. I had at least 2 friends on Mars, a young woman who watched over me with motherly solicitude, and a dumb brute which, as I later came to know, held in its poor ugly carcass more love, more loyalty, and more gratitude than could have been found in the entire 5 million green Martians who rove the deserted cities and dead sea bottoms of Mars. Chapter 7. Child Raising on Mars. After breakfast, which was an excellent replica of the meal of the preceding day and an index of practically every meal which followed while I was with the green men of Mars, Sola escorted me to the plaza, where I found the entire community engaged in watching or helping at the harnessing of huge Macedonian animals to great 3-wheeled chariots. There were about 250 of these vehicles, each drawn by a single animal, any one of which from their appearance might easily have drawn the entire wagon train when fully loaded. The chariots themselves were large, commodious, and gorgeously decorated. In each was seated a female Martian loaded with ornaments of metal, with jewels and silks and furs, and upon the back of each of the beasts which drew the chariots was perched a young Martian driver. Like the animals upon which the warriors were mounted, the heavier draft animals wore neither bit nor bridle, but were guided entirely by telepathic means. Did we know about the telepathy before? I don't remember. This power is wonderfully developed in all Martians, and accounts largely for the simplicity of their language and the relatively few spoken words exchanged, even in long conversations. It is the universal language of Mars, through the medium of which the higher and lower animals of this world of paradoxes are able to communicate to a greater or less extent depending upon the intellectual sphere of the species and the development of the individual. As the cavalcade took up the line of march in single file, Sola dragged me into an empty chariot, and we proceeded with the procession toward the point by which I had entered the city the day before. At the head of the caravan rode some 200 warriors, 5 abreast, and a like number brought up the rear, while 25 or 30 outriders flanked us on either side. Yeah, but they can't understand him, right, because he's a different sphere of species or something, I guess. Or maybe they can understand him, but they don't understand why he doesn't understand them. That's probably going too far. They probably just can't understand each other. Everyone, because there's 2 words in this particular book, but myself, men, women, and children, were heavily armed, and at the tail of each chariot trotted a Martian hound, my own beast following closely behind ours. In fact, the faithful creature never left me voluntarily during the entire 10 years I spent on Mars. Our way led out across the little valley before the city, through the hills, and down into the Dead Sea bottom, which I had traversed on my journey from the incubator to the plaza. The incubator, as it proved, was the terminal point of our journey this day, and as the entire cavalcade broke into a mad gallop as soon as we reached the level expanse of the sea bottom, we were soon within sight of our goal. On reaching it, the chariots were parked with military precision on the 4 sides of the enclosure, and half a score of warriors, headed by the enormous chieftain, and including Tarkas and several other lesser chiefs, dismounted and advanced toward it. I could see Tarkas explaining something to the principal chieftain, whose name, by the way, was, as nearly as I can translate it into English, Lorquas Potamal. Jed being his title. Lorquas Potamal, or if the P's silent, just Tommel. I was soon apprised of the subject of their conversation, as, calling to Sola, Tarkas signed for her to send me to him. I had by this time mastered the intricacies of walking under Martian conditions, and quickly responding to his command, I advanced to the side of the incubator where the warriors stood. As I reached their side, a glance showed me that all but a very few eggs had hatched. The incubator had been fairly alive with the hideous little devils. They ranged in height from 3 to 4 feet, and were moving restlessly about the enclosure as though searching for food. As I came to a halt before him, Tarkas pointed over the incubator and said, "Suck." I saw that he wanted me to repeat my performance of yesterday for the edification of Lord Quaspotamal, and, as I must confess that my prowess had given me no little satisfaction, I responded quickly, leaping entirely over the parked chariots on the far side of the incubator. As I returned, Lord Quaspotamal grunted something at me, and turning to his warriors, gave a few words of command relative to the incubator. They paid no further attention to me, and I was thus permitted to remain close and watch their operations, which consisted in breaking an opening in the wall of the incubator large enough to permit the exit of the young Martians. On either side of this opening, the women and the younger Martians, both male and female, formed 2 solid walls leading out through the chariots and quite a way into the plain beyond. Between these walls the little Martians scampered, wild as deer, being permitted to run the full length of the aisle, where they were captured one at a time by the women and older children, the last in the line capturing the first little one to reach the end of the gauntlet, her opposite in the line capturing the second, and so on, until all the little fellows had left the enclosure and been appropriated by some youth or female. As the women caught the young, they fell out of line and returned to their respective chariots, while those who fell into the hands of the young men were later turned over to some of the women. I saw that the ceremony, if it could be dignified by such a name, was over, and seeking out Sola, I found her in our chariot with a hideous little creature held tightly in her arms. The work of rearing young, green Martians consists solely in teaching them to talk, and to use the weapons of warfare with which they are loaded down from the very first year of their lives. Coming from eggs in which they have lain for 5 years, Jesus. That's a boring fucking development. Coming from the period of incubation, they step forth into the world perfectly developed except in size, entirely unknown to their mothers, who, in turn, would have difficulty in pointing out the fathers with any degree of accuracy. They are the common children of the community, and their education devolves upon the females who chance to capture them as they leave the incubator. Their foster mothers may not even have had an egg in the incubator, as was the case with Sola, who had not commenced to lay until less than a year before she became the mother of another woman's offspring. But this counts for little among the Green Martians, as parental and filial love is as unknown to them as it is common among us. I believe this horrible system, which has been carried on for ages, is the direct cause of the loss of all the finer feelings and higher humanitarian instincts among these poor creatures. Now that's arrogance. Humanitarian instincts in lizard people. Hello, Arashi. Can you believe that? The expectation that other species would be human has always been a little wild to me. Mind you, I know what we really mean when we say humanitarian. We are labeling the finer values and noble attitudes and behaviors and cultures of our own species with our own species name, which, it's a little arrogant. It's a little bit arrogant, right? I mean, my personal values are clearly the pinnacle of humanity, and I'm sure no one in the world disagrees with me. Anyways. From birth, they know no father or mother love, except they literally have a mother teaching them. They know not the meaning of the word home. They are taught that they are only suffered to live until they can demonstrate by their physique and ferocity that they are fit to live. Should they prove deformed or defective in any way, they are promptly shot. Nor do they see a tear shed for a single one of the many cruel hardships they pass through from earliest infancy. So they're Spartan. Got it. You're excited and terrified to play Requiem. Have you been watching Rar and Clue and everyone else play? They're totally fine. Don't worry about it. None of them were shocked or scared or alarmed or had to turn the lights on. I promise. Just do it in a dark room with an unlocked door behind you in a house in the dead of night. And the heat is leaving the timbers, and the creaking is, I promise, just the shrinking of your house. It's just normal sounds. There's nothing wrong. The shadows are supposed to be there. The big zombie girl's making you panic. Do you have pets, Arashi? Maybe ask someone to look after them while you play the game this time. Just this time. No reason. You love your pets, don't you? Would hate to lose them. Not that you would lose them. Why would you lose? That's crazy. But they're downstairs right now. I do not mean that the adult Martians are unnecessarily or intentionally cruel to the young, but theirs is a hard and pitiless struggle for existence upon a dying planet, the natural resources of which have dwindled to a point where the support of each additional life means an added tax upon the community into which it is thrown. By careful selection, they rear only the hardiest specimens of each species, and with almost supernatural foresight, they regulate the birth rate to merely offset the loss by death. Each adult Martian female brings forth about 13 eggs each year, and those which meet the size, weight, and specific gravity tests are hidden in the recesses of some subterranean vault where the temperature is too low for incubation. Every year, these eggs are carefully examined by a council of 20 chieftains, and all but about 100 of the most perfect are destroyed out of each yearly supply. At the end of 5 years, about 500 almost perfect eggs have been chosen from the thousands brought forth. These are then placed in the almost airtight incubators to be hatched by the sun's rays after a period of another 5 years. So it's really 10 years. They've been sitting in that there egg. The hatching, which we had witnessed today, was a fairly representative event of its kind. All but about 1% of the eggs hatched in 2 days. If the remaining eggs ever hatched, we would know nothing of the fate of the little Martians. They were not wanted, as their offspring might inherit and transmit the tendencies to prolonged incubation and thus upset the system which is maintained for ages and which permits the adult Martians to figure the proper time for return to the incubators almost to an hour. Wonder if they just smash them then. Doesn't sound like it. The incubators are built in remote fastnesses, where there is little or no likelihood of their being discovered by other tribes. The result of such a catastrophe would mean no children in the community for another 5 years. I was later to witness the results of the discovery of an alien incubator. The community of which the Green Martians with whom my lot was cast formed a part was composed of some 30,000 souls. They roamed an enormous tract of arid and semi-arid land between 40 and 80 degrees south latitude, and bounded on the east and west by 2 large fertile tracts. Their headquarters lay in the southwest corner of this district, near the crossing of 2 of the so-called Martian canals. As the incubator had been placed far north of their own territory in a supposedly uninhabited and unfrequented area, we had before us a tremendous journey, concerning which I, of course, knew nothing. After our return to the dead city, I passed several days in comparative idleness. On the day following our return, all the warriors had ridden forth early in the morning and had not returned until just before darkness fell. As I later learned, they had been to the subterranean vaults in which the eggs were kept and had transported them to the incubator, which they had then walled up for another 5 years, and which, in all probability, would not be visited again during that period. Yeah, you gotta have someone protecting it. Like, what are you doing? The vaults which hid the eggs until they were ready for the incubator were located many miles south of the incubator, and would be visited yearly by the council of 20 chieftains. Why they did not arrange to build their vaults and incubators near home has always been a mystery to me, and, like many other Martian mysteries, unsolved and unsolvable by earthly reasoning and customs. Sola's duties were now doubled, as she was compelled to care for the young Martian as well as for me, but neither one of us required much attention. And as we were both about equally advanced in Martian education, Sola took it upon herself to train us together. Her prize consisted in a male about 4 feet tall, very strong and physically perfect. Also, he learned quickly, and we had considerable amusement, at least I did, over the keen rivalry we displayed. The Martian language, as I have said, is extremely simple, and in a week I could make all my wants known and understand nearly everything that was said to me. Likewise, under Sola's tutelage, I developed my telepathic powers so that I shortly could sense practically everything that went on around me. Did you hear that, guys? Humans can develop telepathic powers if they live on Mars. That's what Elon Musk really wants. I've cracked the case. No pun intended. Maybe no pun intended. Oh, how does work? Valana, that's not a sentence. What surprised Sola most in me was that while I could catch telepathic messages easily from others, and often when they were not intended for me, no one could read a jot from my mind under any circumstances. At first, this vexed me, but later I was very glad of it, as it gave me an undoubted advantage over the Martians. Oh, we have a secret power. So, we can detect telepathic messages. Okay, sure, it's like, perhaps that's like exercising a muscle in your brain. But our brains are not built to emit telepathic messages? Okay. I mean, sure, I'll buy that. Makes sense. Not that it needs to make sense, but it makes sense. We don't have the equipment. Chapter 8. A fair captive from the sky. The third day after the incubator ceremony, we set forth toward home. Wait. Are you still learning language at this point? How long did that take? In a week, he can make all of his things want. So, I mean, I guess she's had for a few days. I mean, a week's not 3 days, though. Anyways. Okay. Hiccuping. The third day after the incubator ceremony, we set forth toward home. But scarcely had the head of the procession debouched into the open ground before the city, then orders were given for an immediate and hasty return. As though trained for years in this particular evolution, the green Martians melted like mist into the spacious doorways of the nearby buildings, until in less than 3 minutes the entire cavalcade of chariots, mastodons, and mounted warriors was nowhere to be seen. Sola and I entered a building upon the front of the city, in fact, the same one in which I had my encounter with the apes, and, wishing to see what had caused the sudden retreat, I mounted to an upper floor and peered from the window out over the valley and the hills beyond. See, if we let him go into the same building, we don't have to pay for an extra set piece. I peered from the window out over the valley and the hills beyond, and there I saw the cause of their sudden scurrying to cover. A huge craft, long, low, and gray-painted, swung slowly over the crest of the nearest hill. Following it came another, and another, and another, until 20 of them, swinging low above the ground, sailed slowly and majestically toward us. Each carried a strange banner swung from stem to stern above the upper works, and upon the prow of each was painted some odd device that gleamed in the sunlight and showed plainly, even at the distance at which we were from the vessels. I could see figures crowding the forward decks and upper works of the aircraft. Whether they had discovered us or simply were looking at the deserted city, I could not say. But in any event, they received a rude reception. For suddenly and without warning, the green Martian warriors fired a terrific volley from the windows of the buildings facing the little valley across which the great ships were so peacefully advancing. Instantly the scene changed as by magic. The foremost vessel swung broadside toward us, and bringing her guns into play, returned our fire. Ooh, hang on. Many things are a raid. Hello, Star Otter. I saw you were streaming. Thank you for raiding, friend. Everybody, welcome into my chat. What were you doing today? You're playing Fields of Mystria. Fields of Mystria. I don't know what that is. I mean, I did see the title before. I recognize that now. Fields of Mystria. I hope you had a good time. Did you win? I don't even... Do you win in this game? What is the win condition? Magic Stardew? Isn't Stardew already magic? I hope you had a great time. Fields of Mystery. Oh, that's cute. That looks cute. Farm Life Simulation Roleplay. I hope you had a fantastic stream. Was it very chill? It looks like a chill game. It looks like a chill game. I hope you were super having a good time. Everybody, welcome into my channel. My name is Sidoen, if you don't know me. I am a librarian. And this here, it be my library. Notice my hand waving and gesturing towards the books behind me. Monday nights, I do be reading. Tonight we are continuing A Princess of Mars, of which I don't believe we've met the character referenced in the title as yet. Other nights, I play games, largely Space Marines 2, Helldivers 2 on Thursdays. I sometimes mistake that day. And The Toil of the Mines. Chill was working in the mines. Yeah, working in the mines is very chill. It's why you have to take a sweater. Yes, a sweater, some warm clothing, and gloves. Mittens are good. Layer up. That's important to layer up. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, we play games Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sunday mornings. Yeah. And that's me. You are... Man, my brain's like, that was a short introduction. What else do we do? We've given you the shout out. That's awesome. Everybody. Otter, I'm sure you're tired from the stream. Please feel free to lurk, chill out, grab a snack, get comfortable, or depart and go to bed. As you do, as you need. Everyone else, really, honestly, the same. We're going to keep reading this book for a few hours yet, so you're welcome to hang around and relax and listen. Or go play games. That's fun too. Yeah, thank you for the raid. Oh, my brain's like, I'm missing something. I forgot to say something. I forgot a tradition. Or both. Both is good. Yeah, I guess you could do both. Both is possible. Not for me. My brain's very much a one-tracked attention thingy. Oh, I just know this. Anyways. I was going to raid you, but you didn't stream long enough, Otter. Haha, there you go. Vengeance comment. Yeah, I'll return to reading. We shall return. Where were we? Oh, yes. Our Martians were being attacked by graceful ships, and we now have a battle. Actually, we have ads in 3 minutes. Why do people raid just before the ads? It's always the case. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Have some ads. No. You know what? We're going to snooze that. And we're going to read for at least, 7 minutes before we subject people to advertisements. I think that's fair. Here we go. Instantly, the scene changed as by magic. I've already done it. Instantly, the scene changed as by magic. The foremost vessel swung broadside toward us, and bringing her guns into play, returned our fire. At the same time, moving parallel to our front for a short distance, and then turning back, with the evident intention of completing a great circle, which would bring her up to position once more opposite our firing line. The other vessels followed in her wake. There's about another 19 of them, each one opening upon us as she swung into position. Our own fire never diminished, and I doubt if 25% of our shots went wild. It had never been given to me to see such a deadly accuracy of aim, and it seemed as though a little figure on each one of the craft dropped at the explosion of each bullet, while the banners and upperworks dissolved in spurts of flame as the irresistible projectiles of our warriors mowed through them. The fire from the vessels was almost ineffectual, owing, as I afterward learned, to the unexpected suddenness of the first volley, which caught the ship's crews entirely unprepared and the sighting apparatus of the guns unprotected from the deadly aim of our warriors. It seems that each green warrior has certain objective points for his fire under relatively identical circumstances of warfare. For example, a proportion of them, always the best marksmen, direct their fire entirely upon the wireless finding and sighting apparatus of the big guns of an attacking naval force. Another detail attends to the smaller guns in the same way. Others pick off the gunners, still others the officers, while certain other quotas concentrate their attention upon the other members of the crew, upon the upper works, and upon the steering gear and propellers. 20 minutes after the first volley, the great fleet swung trailing off in the direction from which it had first appeared. Several of the craft were limping perceptibly, and it seemed but barely under the control of their depleted crews. Their fire had ceased entirely, and all their energies seemed focused upon escape. Our warriors then rushed up to the roofs of the buildings which we occupied and followed the retreating armada with a continuous fusillade of deadly fire. One by one, however, the ships managed to dip below the crests of the outlying hills until only one barely moving craft was in sight. This had received the brunt of our fire and seemed to be entirely unmanned, as not a moving figure was visible upon her decks. Slowly she swung from her course, circling back toward us in an erratic and pitiful manner. Instantly the warriors ceased firing, for it was quite apparent that the vessel was entirely helpless, and, far from being in a position to inflict harm upon us, she could not even control herself sufficiently to escape. As she neared the city, the warriors rushed out upon the plain to meet her, but it was evident that she still was too high for them to hope to reach her decks. From my vantage point in the window, I could see the bodies of her crew strewn about, although I could not make out what manner of creatures they might be. Not a sign of life was manifest upon her as she drifted slowly with the light breeze in a southeasterly direction. She was drifting some 50 feet above the ground, followed by all but some 100 of the warriors who had been ordered back to the roofs to cover the possibility of a return of the fleet, or of reinforcements. It soon became evident that she would strike the face of the buildings about a mile south of our position, and as I watched the progress of the chase, I saw a number of warriors gallop ahead, dismount, and enter the building she seemed destined to touch. The craft neared the building, and just before she struck, the Martian warriors swarmed upon her from the windows, and with their great spears eased the shock of the collision. And in a few moments they had thrown out grappling hooks, and the big boat was being hauled to ground by their fellows below. After making her fast, they swarmed the sides and searched the vessel from stem to stern. I could see them examining the dead sailors, evidently for signs of life, and presently a party of them appeared from below, dragging a little figure among them. The creature was considerably less than half as tall as the green Martian warriors, and from my balcony I could see that it walked erect upon 2 legs, and surmised that it was some new and strange Martian monstrosity with which I had not as yet become acquainted. They removed the prisoner to the ground, and then commenced a systematic rifling of the vessel. This operation required several hours, during which time a number of the chariots were requisitioned to transport the loot, which consisted in arms, ammunition, silks, furs, jewels, strangely carved stone vessels, and a quantity of solid foods and liquids, including many casks of water, the first I had seen since my advent upon Mars. He was drinking plant milk. After the last load had been removed, the warriors made lines fast to the craft and towed her far out into the valley in a southwesterly direction. A few of them then boarded her and were busily engaged in what appeared from my distant position as the emptying of the contents of various carboys upon the dead bodies and the sailors over the decks and works of the vessel. This operation concluded, they hastily clambered over her sides, sliding down the guy ropes to the ground. The last warrior to leave the deck turned and threw something back upon the vessel, waiting an instant to note the outcome of his act. A faint spurt of flame rose from the point where the missile struck, and he swung over the side and was quickly upon the ground. Scarcely had he alighted than the guy ropes were simultaneously released, and the great warship, lightened by the removal of the loot, soared majestically into the air, her decks and upperworks a mass of roaring flames. All right, we will pause there for the ads. I do like to pause. I don't think people should have to pay for subscriptions or Turbo to hear the whole story. So we're going to hit ads and we'll be back in just 3 minutes. So we'll switch to the game scene. That would be a very different stream. We won't do that. Okay, where were we? Here we go. All right, they've sent the ship sky high, roaring in flames, right? Massive roaring flames. Oh, the Diet Coke I had earlier is burping itself back up my tummy, out my mouth. Slowly she drifted to the southeast, rising higher and higher as the flames ate away her wooden parts and diminished the weight upon her. Ascending to the roof of the building, I watched her for hours, until finally she was lost in the dim vistas of the distance. The sight was awe-inspiring, and in the extreme as one contemplated this mighty floating funeral pyre, drifting unguided and unmanned through the lonely wastes of the Martian heavens, a derelict of death and destruction, typifying the life story of these strange and ferocious creatures into whose unfriendly hands fate had carried it. Much depressed and, to me, unaccountably so, I slowly descended to the street. The scene I had witnessed seemed to mark the defeat and annihilation of the forces of a kindred people, rather than the routing by our green warriors of a horde of similar, though unfriendly creatures. I could not fathom the seeming hallucination, nor could I free myself from it, but somewhere in the innermost recesses of my soul I felt a strange yearning toward these unknown foemen, and a mighty hope surged through me that the fleet would return and demand a reckoning from the green warriors who had so ruthlessly and wantonly attacked it. Close at my heel, in his now accustomed place, followed Woola, the hound. As I emerged upon the street, Sola rushed up to me as though I had been the object of some search on her part. The cavalcade was returning to the plaza, the homeward march having been given up for that day, nor was it in fact recommenced for more than a week, owing to the fear of a return attack by the aircraft. Lord Quaspatumel was too astute an old warrior to be caught upon the open plains with a caravan of chariots and children, and so we remained at the deserted city until the danger seemed past. Well, he definitely has his language down then. As Sola and I entered the plaza, a sight met my eyes which filled my whole being with a great surge of mingled hope, fear, exultation, and depression. And yet most dominant was a subtle sense of relief and happiness, for just as we neared the throng of Martians, I caught a glimpse of the prisoner from the battlecraft, who was being roughly dragged into a nearby building by a couple of green Martian females. And the sight which met my eyes was that of a slender, girlish figure, similar in every detail to the earthly women of my past life. She did not see me at first, but just as she was disappearing through the portal of the building, which was to be her prison, she turned and her eyes met mine. Her face was oval and beautiful in the extreme. Her every feature was finely chiseled and exquisite, her eyes large and lustrous, and her head surmounted by a mass of coal-black, waving hair caught loosely into a strange yet becoming coiffure. Her skin was of a light reddish copper color, against which the crimson glow of her cheeks and the ruby of her beautifully molded lips shone with a strangely enhancing effect. This reminds me of a video I once watched. It's some creator. Yeah, but she was pretty. Yeah, might be pretty. She kind of one of the videos she did. I cannot remember her name. She's kind of very lighthearted. She's an artist. She's made a number of videos against AI and detailing the problems around them from the artist perspective. And yeah, it's men writing women, and this is men writing women. And she went over a number. Oh yeah, she was doing a little challenge where she would read these descriptions and then literally try to draw the character. They just come out as just like horrific caricatures of what the character, what beauty is supposed to be, and it's just, yeah, men writing women, just bizarre. She was as destitute of clothes, of course she was, as the green Martians who accompanied her. Indeed, save for her highly wrought ornaments, she was entirely naked. Nor could any apparel have enhanced the beauty of her perfect and symmetrical figure. Look, I got me a naked female. Holy cow. And she's symmetrical. The most important characteristic of beauty that clearly every person has ever. As her gaze rested on me, her eyes opened wide in astonishment, and she made a little sign with her free hand, a sign which I did not, of course, understand. Just a moment we gazed upon each other, and then the look of hope and renewed courage which had glorified her face as she discovered me faded into one of utter dejection, mingled with loathing and contempt. I realized I had not answered her signal, and ignorant as I was of Martian customs, I intuitively felt that she had made an appeal for succor and protection, which my unfortunate ignorance had prevented me from answering. And then she was dragged out of my sight into the depths of the desert edifices. Ah, you disappointed the damsel in distress, whatever shalt thou do? I'm very burpy. Every time you detect a lull in the reading, I am probably burping. You can blame Valana. She purchased me a Diet Coke for dinner. That's what I do. Chapter 9. I learned the language, which I thought he had done already. It only took him a week. As I can... True, you weren't thinking. That's right, exactly. There gonna have to be a punishment later for that, yes. As I came back to myself, I glanced at Sola, who had witnessed this encounter, and I was surprised to note a strange expression upon her usually expressionless countenance. What her thoughts were I did not know, for as yet I had learned but little of the Martian tongue, enough only to suffice for my daily needs. Oh no, are the women in your life jealous upon one another? As I reached the doorway of our building, a strange surprise awaited me. A warrior approached bearing the arms, ornaments, and full accoutrements of his kind. These he presented to me with a few unintelligible words, and a bearing at once respectful and menacing. Yes. You are the Alpha Chad of Mars. Congratulations, here is your loot. Later, Sola, with the aid of several of the other women, remolded the trappings to fit my lesser proportions. And after they completed the work, I went about garbed in all the panoply of war. Because he can jump real good, that's right. He can jump. And he punches things. And he beat up the apes, right? Remember that. He beat up the apes. He killed them with his puppy dog. From then on, I guess, and he survived a battle by hiding, I guess. But he survived. Oh, right. From then on, Sola instructed me in the mysteries of the various weapons with which the Martian young I spent several hours each day practicing upon the plaza. I was not yet proficient with all the weapons, but my great familiarity with similar earthly weapons made me an unusual apt pupil, and I progressed in a very satisfactory manner. Oh, hydrate. Thank you, Queen. Yes, here we go. Yes, hydration. Important. Fluids. It's good to have fluids to moisten the throat. Thankfully, this is not a Diet Coke. Right, he progressed in a very satisfactory manner. Yep, slurping the air. Yep, it's not carbonated air though, so it's fine, don't worry about it. It's good. Yes, carbonated air. The air is aerated. The training of myself and the young Martians was conducted solely by the women, who not only attended to the education of the young in the arts of individual defense and offense, but are also the artisans who produce every manufactured article wrought by the Green Martians. This is so typical. The men fight, the men mate, the women do all the work and the culture. They make the powder, the cartridges, the firearms. Oh, they also make the toys for war. In fact, everything of value is produced by the females. In time of actual warfare, they form a part of the reserves, and when the necessity arises, fight with even greater intelligence and ferocity than the men. They send the men off to war to distract them from the purpose of civilization. Oh, that's interesting. Men are such babies. The men are trained in the higher branches of the art of war, in strategy and the maneuvering of large bodies of troops, which requires intelligence. Side note. They make the laws as they are needed, a new law for each emergency. They are unfettered by precedent in the administration of justice. Customs have been handed down by ages of repetition, but the punishment for ignoring a custom is a matter for individual treatment by a jury of the culprit's peers. And I may say that justice seldom misses fire. Misfires, perhaps, but seems rather to rule in inverse ratio to the ascendancy of law. In one respect, at least, the Martians are a happy people. They have no lawyers. As much as we hate lawyers for being lawyers, they serve a very important purpose, a very important role in the rule of law. So, yeah, it's fun to hate on lawyers, but I don't think we'd actually be a happier people. Maybe individuals would be happier. Yeah, also feel justice is might makes right. Yeah, there's definitely a layer of that here. You don't need lawyers if your justice is done by might makes right. Yeah, absolutely. These are primitive barbarian savages. They're the barbarians of the plains in the Forgotten Realms, right? Right. They're chaotic. They're chaotic neutral. Let's go for chaotic neutral, and they rule by tradition and custom rather than really by law and order. I did not see the prisoner again for several days subsequent to our first encounter, and then only to catch a fleeting glimpse of her as she was being conducted to the great audience chamber where I had had my first meeting with Lorquas Potomel. I could not but note the unnecessary harshness and brutality with which her guards treated her, so different from the almost maternal kindness which Sola manifested toward me. Well, you can jump. And the respectful attitude of the few green Martians who took the trouble to notice me at all. Oh, itchy nose. I had observed on the 2 occasions when I had seen her that the prisoner exchanged words with her guards, and this convinced me that they spoke, or at least could make themselves understood by a common language. With this added incentive, I nearly drove Sola distracted by importunities. by my importunities to hasten on my education. Oh dear, I just can't stop pausing. And within a few more days, I had mastered the Martian tongue sufficiently well to enable me to carry on a passable conversation, to fully understand practically all that I heard. I wish I could learn a language that quickly, even a simple one. Your brain's too clogged up with English to do much else. At this time, our sleeping quarters were occupied by 3 or 4 females and a couple of the recently hatched young. Besides Sola and her youthful ward, myself and Wula the hound. After they had retired for the night, it was customary for the adults to carry on a desultory conversation for a short time before lapsing into sleep. And now that I could understand their language, I was always a keen listener, although I never proffered any remarks myself. On the night following the prisoner's visit to the audience chamber, the conversation finally fell upon this subject, and I was all ears on the instant. I had feared to question Sola relative to the beautiful captive. The beautiful captive. You could have just said the captive, as I could not but recall the strange expression I had noted upon her face after my first encounter with the prisoner. That it denoted jealousy, I could not say, and yet, judging all things by mundane standards as I still did, I felt it safer to affect indifference in the matter until I learned more surely Sola's attitude toward the subject of my solicitude. Sarkoja, one of the older women who shared our domicile, had been present at the audience as one of the captive's guards, and was toward her the question turned. "When," asked one of the women, "will we enjoy the death throes of the Red One, or does Lord Quaspatamal Jed intend holding her for ransom?" "They have decided to carry her with us back to Thark, and exhibit her last agonies at the great games before Tal Hajas," replied Sarkoja. "What will be the manner of her going out?" inquired Sola. "She is very small and very beautiful. I had hoped that they would hold her for ransom." Sarkoja and the other women grunted angrily at this evidence of weakness on the part of Sola. "It is sad, Sola, that you were not born 1,000,000 years ago," snapped Sarkoja, "when all the hollows of the land were filled with water and the peoples were as soft as the stuff they sailed upon. In our day we have progressed to a point where such sentiments mark weakness and atavism. It will not be well for you to permit Tartarchus to learn that you hold such degenerate sentiments, as I doubt that he would care to entrust such as you with the grave responsibilities of maternity." "I see nothing wrong with my expression in interest on this red woman," retorted Sola. "She has never harmed us, nor would she, hang on, my brain's not parsing this, nor would she should we have fallen into her hands. Well, you don't know that. It is only the men of her kind who war upon us, and I have never thought that their attitude toward us is but the reflection of ours toward them. They live at peace with all their fellows except when duty calls upon them to make war, while we are at peace with none, forever warring among our own kind as well as upon the red men. And even in our own communities, the individuals fight amongst themselves. Oh, it is one continual, awful period of bloodshed from the time we break the shell until we gladly embrace the bosom of the river of mystery, the dark and ancient Is which carries us into an unknown, but at least no more frightful and terrible existence. Fortunate indeed is he who meets his end in an early death. Say what you please to Tartarchus, he can mete out no worse fate to me than a continuation of the horrible existence we are forced to lead in this life." This wild outbreak on the part of Sola so greatly surprised and shocked the other women that, after a few words of general reprimand, they all lapsed into silence and were soon asleep. One thing the episode had accomplished was to assure me of Sola's friendliness toward the poor girl, and also to convince me that I had been extremely fortunate in falling into her hands rather than those of some of the other females. You don't know that she's a poor girl. You don't know that she's peaceful or that Sola is correct. You saw her naked. That's what happened here. Wait. Oh, it's good. It's fine. My activity feed moved, but nothing is new? That's very strange. Then some of the other views. I knew that she was fond of me, and now I had discovered that she hated cruelty and barbarity. I was confident that I could depend upon her to aid me and the girl captive to escape. Provided, of course, that such a thing was within the range of possibilities. I did not even know that there were any better conditions to escape to, but I was more than willing to take my chances among people fashioned after my own mold rather than to remain longer among the hideous and bloodthirsty green men of Mars. But where to go, and how, was as much of a puzzle to me as the age-old search for the spring of eternal life has been to earthly men since the beginning of time. I decided that, at the first opportunity, I would take Sola into my confidence and openly ask her to aid me. And with this resolution strong upon me, I turned upon my silks and furs and slept the dreamless and refreshing sleep of Mars. Okay. Chapter 10, Champion and Chief. Early the next morning I was astir. Considerable freedom was allowed me, as Sola had informed me that so long as I did not attempt to leave the city, I was free to go and come as I pleased. She had warned me, however, against adventuring forth unarmed, as this city, like all other deserted metropolises of an ancient Martian civilization, was peopled by the great white apes of my second day's adventure. Why live here? In advising me that I must not leave the boundaries of the city, Sola had explained that Woola would prevent this anyway should I attempt it, and she warned me most urgently not to arouse his fierce nature by ignoring his warnings should I venture too close to the forbidden territory. His nature was such, she said, that he would bring me back into the city, dead or alive should I persist in opposing him. Preferably dead, she added. I don't know. Puppy Dog was very earnest in his defense of him. On this morning I had chosen a new street to explore when suddenly I found myself at the limits of the city. Before me were low hills pierced by narrow and inviting ravines. I longed to explore the country before me, and, like the pioneer stock from which I sprang, to view what landscape beyond the encircling hills might disclose from the summits which shut out my view. It also occurred to me that this would prove an excellent opportunity to test the qualities of Woola. I was convinced that the brute loved me. I had seen more evidences of affection in him than in any other Martian animal, man, or beast, and I was sure that gratitude for the acts that I had twice saved his life would more than outweigh his loyalty to the duty imposed upon him by cruel and loveless masters. You know, the ones he'd grown up with, right? As I approached the boundary line, Woola ran anxiously before me and thrust his body against my legs. His expression was pleading rather than ferocious, nor did he bare his great tusks or utter his fearful guttural warnings. Denied the friendship and companionship of my kind, I had developed considerable affection for Woola and Sola. For the normal earthly man must have some outlet for his natural affections, and so I decided upon an appeal to a like instinct in this great brute, sure that I would not be disappointed. I had never petted nor fondled him, but now I sat upon the ground, and putting my arms around his heavy neck, I stroked and coaxed him, talking in my newly acquired Martian tongue, as I would have to my hound at home, as I would have talked to any other friend among the lower animals. His response to my manifestation of affection was remarkable to a degree. He stretched his great mouth to its full width, baring the entire expanse of his upper rows of tusks, and wrinkling his snout until his great eyes were almost hidden by the folds of flesh. If you have ever seen a collie smile, you may have some idea of Woola's facial distortion. Pretty much, bro is horny. Yeah. Justice is in my loins. He threw himself upon his back and fairly wallowed at my feet, jumped up and sprang upon me, rolling me upon the ground by his great weight, then wriggling and squirming around me like a playful puppy presenting its back for the petting it craves. I could not resist the ludicrousness of this spectacle, and holding my sides, I rocked back and forth in the first laughter which had passed my lips in many days. The first, in fact, since the morning Powell had left camp with his horse, long unused, had precipitatedly and unexpectedly bucked him off head foremost into a pot of frijoles. I believe it's a fake name. My laughter frightened Woola. His antics ceased and he crawled pitifully toward me, poking his ugly head far into my lap, and then I remembered what laughter signified on Mars. Torture, suffering, death. Quietening myself, I rubbed the poor old fellow's head and back, talked to him for a few minutes, and then in an authoritative tone commanded him to follow me, and arising, started for the hills. There was no further question of authority between us. Woola was my devoted slave from that moment hence, and I his only and undisputed master. My walk to the hills occupied but a few minutes, and I found nothing of particular interest to reward me. Numerous brilliantly colored and strangely formed wildflowers dotted the ravines, and from the summit of the first hill I saw still other hills stretching off toward the north, and rising one range above another until lost in mountains of quite respectable dimensions. Though I afterward found that only a few peaks on all Mars exceeded 4,000 feet in height, the suggestion of magnitude was merely relative. My morning's walk had been large with importance to me, for it had resulted in a perfect understanding with Woola, upon whom Tarkas relied for my safekeeping. Advantage gained. I now knew that while theoretically a prisoner, I was virtually free, and I hastened to regain the city limits before the defection of Woola could be discovered by his erstwhile masters. The adventure decided me never again to leave the limits of my prescribed stamping grounds until I was ready to venture forth for good and all, as it would certainly result in a curtailment of my liberties, as well as the possible death of Woola, were we to be discovered. On regaining the plaza, I had my third glimpse of the captive girl. She was standing with her guards before the entrance to the audience chamber, and as I approached, she gave one haughty glance and turned her back full upon me. The act was so womanly, so earthily womanly, that, though it stung my pride, it also warmed my heart with a feeling of companionship. It was good to know that someone else on Mars, beside myself, had human instincts of a civilized order, even though the manifestation of them was so painful and mortifying. Hello, Clue. Hello, everyone. Not to interrupt the flow of reading. Too late! Too late, you've done it! Hope you're having a good night, Clue. Had a green Martian woman desired to show dislike or contempt, she would, in all likelihood, have done it with a sword thrust or a movement of her trigger finger. But as their sentiments are mostly atrophied, it would have required a serious injury to have aroused such passions in them. Sola, let me add, was an exception. I never saw her perform a cruel or uncouth act, or fail in uniform kindliness and good nature. She was, indeed, as her fellow Martian had said of her, an atavism, a dear and precious reversion to a former type of loved and loving ancestor. Yeah, we are doing good. Seeing that the prisoners seemed the center of attraction, I halted to view the proceedings. I had not long to wait, for presently Lord Quaspotomal and his retinue of chieftains approached the building and, signing the guards to follow with the prisoner, entered the audience chamber. Realizing that I was a somewhat favored character, and also convinced that the warriors did not know of my proficiency in their language, as I had pled with Sola to keep this a secret on the grounds that I did not wish to be forced to talk with the men until I had perfectly mastered the Martian tongue, I chanced an attempt to enter the audience chamber and listen to the proceedings. The council squatted upon the steps of the rostrum, while below them stood the prisoner and her 2 guards. I saw that one of the women was Sarkoja, and thus understood how she had been present at the hearing of the preceding day, the results of which she had reported to the occupants of our dormitory last night. Her attitude toward the captive was most harsh and brutal. When she held her, she sunk her rudimentary nails into the poor girl's flesh or twisted her arm in a most painful manner. When it was necessary to move from one spot to another, she either jerked her roughly or pushed her headlong before her. She seemed to be venting upon this poor, defenseless creature all the hatred, cruelty, ferocity, and spite of her 900 years, backed by unguessable ages of fierce and brutal ancestors. She should be headed down the river Is pretty soon at that age. The other woman was less cruel because she was entirely indifferent. If the prisoner had been left to her alone, and fortunately she was at night, she would have received no harsh treatment, nor by the same token would she have received any attention at all. As Lord Quaspotomal raised his eyes to address the prisoner, they fell on me, and he turned to Tars Tarkas with a word and gesture of impatience. Tars Tarkas made some reply which I could not catch, but which caused Lord Quaspotomal to smile, after which they paid no further attention to me. "What is your name?" asked Lord Quaspotomal, addressing the prisoner. "Dija Thoris, daughter of Mors Kajak of Helium." "And the nature of your expedition?" he continued. "It was a purely scientific research party sent out by my father's father, the Jadak of Helium, to rechart the air currents and to take atmospheric density tests," replied the fair prisoner in a low, well-modulated voice. "We were unprepared for battle," she continued, "as we were on a peaceful mission, as our banners and the colors of our craft denoted. The work we were doing was as much in your interests as in ours, for you know full well that were it not for our labors and the fruits of our scientific operations, there would not be enough air or water on Mars to support a single human life." Human. For ages, we have maintained the air and water supply at practically the same point without any appreciable loss, and we have done this in the face of the brutal and ignorant interference of you green men. Why, oh why will you not learn to live in amity with your fellows? Must you ever go on down the ages to your final extinction but little above the plane of the dumb brutes that serve you? A people without written language, without art, without homes, without love, the victims of eons of the horrible community idea. Owing everything in common, even to your women and children, has resulted in your owning nothing in common. You hate each other as you hate all else except yourselves. Come back to the ways of our common ancestors. Come back to the light of kindliness and fellowship. The way is open to you. You will find the hands of the red men stretched out to aid you. Together we may do still more to regenerate our dying planet. The granddaughter of the greatest and mightiest of the Red Jedaks has asked you. Will you come? Come and be civilized. Yeah, I feel like that's not going to happen somehow. Lord Quaspatumel and the warriors sat looking silently and intently at the young woman for several moments after she had ceased speaking. What was passing in their minds no man may know, but that they were moved, I truly believe, and if one man high among them had been strong enough to rise above custom, that moment would have marked a new and mighty era for Mars. I saw Tarkas rise to speak, and on his face was such an expression as I had never seen upon the countenance of a green Martian warrior. It bespoke an inward and mighty battle with self, with hereditary, with age-old custom, and as he opened his mouth to speak, a look of almost benignity yes, he's trying to be benign, of kindliness, momentarily lighted up his fierce and terrible countenance. What words of moment were to have fallen from his lips were never spoken. As just then a young warrior, evidently sensing the trend of thought among the older men, leaped down from the steps of the rostrum and, striking the frail captive a powerful blow across the face, which felled her to the floor, placed his foot upon her prostrate form, and turned toward the assembled council, broke into peals of horrid, mirthless laughter. For an instant, I thought Tarkas would strike him dead, nor did the aspect of Lord Quaspatumel augur any too favorably for the brute. But the mood passed. Their old selves reasserted their ascendancy, and they smiled. It was portentous, however, that they did not laugh aloud, for the brute's act constituted a side-splitting witticism according to the ethics which rule green Martian humor. That I have taken moments to write down a part of what occurred as that blow fell does not signify that I remained inactive for any such length of time. I think I must have sensed something of what was coming, for I realized now that I was crouched as for a spring as I saw the blow aimed at her beautiful, upturned, pleading face, and ere the hand descended, I was halfway across the hall. Scarcely had his hideous laugh rang out but once when I was upon him. The brute was 12 feet in height and armed to the teeth, and with teeth, I might add, but I believe that I could have accounted for the whole roomful in the terrific intensity of my rage. Springing upward, I struck him full in the face as he turned at me at my warning cry, and then as he drew his short sword, I drew mine and sprang upon his breast, hooking one leg over the butt of his pistol and grasping one of his huge tusks with my left hand, while I delivered blow after blow upon his enormous chest. He could not use his short sword to advantage because I was too close to him, nor could he draw his pistol, which he attempted to do in direct opposition to Martian custom, which says you may not fight a fellow warrior in private combat with anything other than the weapon with which you are attacked. In fact, he could do nothing but make a wild and futile attempt to dislodge me. With all his immense bulk, he was little, if any, stronger than I, and it was but the matter of a moment or two before he sank, bleeding and lifeless, to the floor. Yes. Come and be civilized. Yeah, rage and horny. Yes. Ragey and horny. Deja Thoris had raised herself upon one elbow and was watching the battle with wide, staring eyes. When I had regained my feet, I raised her in my arms and bore her to one of the benches at the side of the room. Again, no Martian interfered with me, and tearing a piece of silk from my cape, I endeavored to staunch the flow of blood from her nostrils. I was soon successful, as her injuries amounted to little more than an ordinary nosebleed, and when she could speak, she placed her hand upon my arm, and looking up into my eyes, said, "Why did you do it? You who refused even friendly recognition in the first hour of my peril, and now you risk your life and kill one of your companions for my sake. I cannot understand. What strange manner of man are you, that you consort with the green men, though your form is that of my race, while your color is little darker than that of the white ape. Oh, he's a mixture of everybody. Tell me, are you human, or are you more than human? I love that assumption. Are you more than human, as opposed to just different? Yeah, thank goodness they didn't break her nose and her perfect symmetry. Exactly. That would be terrible. Both nostrils have to bleed at the same rate and then heal at the same. Yeah, are you a god? Yeah, are you a god? The ego is amazing. I love it. It is a strange tale, I replied, too long to attempt to tell you now, and one which I so much doubt the credibility of myself that I fear to hope that others will believe it. Suffice it for the present that I am your friend, and, so far as our captors will permit, your protector and your servant. Oh, right, because he's from the southern. He is a fine southern gentleman. That's right, him and his buddy from the army. He's the original nice guy. Yeah. Yes, yes, Deja Thoris. I too am a prisoner. My name is John Carter, not Connor. Connor is the one from Terminator. And I claim Virginia, one of the United States of America, Earth, as my home. But why I am permitted to wear arms, I do not know. Nor was I aware that my regalia was that of a chieftain. Wait, it is? His regalia is that of a chieftain? What, did we know that? Was that revealed to us? We were interrupted at this juncture by the approach of one of the warriors, bearing arms, accoutrements, and ornaments. And in a flash, one of her questions was answered, and a puzzle cleared up for me. I saw that the body of my dead antagonist had been stripped, and I read in the menacing yet respectful attitude of the warrior who had brought me these trophies of the kill the same demeanor as that evidenced by the other who had brought me my original equipment. And now, for the first time, I realized that my blow, on the occasion of my first battle in the audience chamber, had resulted in the death of my adversary. The reason for the whole attitude displayed toward me was now apparent. I had won my spurs, so to speak, in the crude justice which always marks Martian dealings, and which, among other things, has caused me to call her the planet of paradoxes. I was accorded the honors due to a conqueror, the trappings and the position of the man I killed. In truth, I was a Martian chieftain, and this I learned later was the cause of my great freedom and my toleration in the audience chamber. Yeah, and his title of chief being given to John. But so I guess the one he killed beforehand, right? Not this one here. Did he kill one beforehand? I know he punched someone. Was that a death? Was that a one punch? Is he One Punch Man with that moment? Before when they were asking him to jump around a little? As I had turned to receive the dead warrior's chattels, I had noticed that Tarkas and several others had pushed forward towards us, and the eyes of the former rested upon me in a most quizzical manner. Finally he addressed me. And defeated earned him death. That's kind of like, I don't like that storytelling. One defeat equals death. How do you have any population left? Every conflict is going to have a winner and a loser, right? Unless you like be more civilized and decide to, come to accommodations. Every argument is going to end up in one person dying. That's crazy. Every bout of fisticuffs is going to have your population. Like, they had thousands of eggs and they chopped those down to 100. But yeah, it's like, yeah. Anyways. Yeah, they step on most of the eggs, right? Like 1% of them birth or something. Yeah. Finally, he addressed me. You speak the tongue of Barsoom quite readily for one who was deaf and dumb to us a few short days ago. Where did you learn it, John Carter? You yourself are responsible, Tars Tarkas, I replied, and that you furnished me with an instructress of remarkable ability. I have to thank Sola for my learning. Sergeant Tinman, the Mars population in these books don't make much sense. Like, no, it's a little off, but that's okay. The population in the Warhammer 40k universe also makes no sense. I guess we can't really attribute science fiction authors to do population studies properly. And welcome to my channel. Thanks for chatting. Sola for my learning. She has done well, he answered. But your education in other respects needs considerable polish. Do you know what your unprecedented temerity would have cost you had you failed to kill either of the two chieftains whose metal you now wear? I presume that the one whom I failed to kill would have killed me, I answered, smiling. No, you are wrong. Only in the last extremity of self-defense would a Martian warrior kill a prisoner. We like to save them for other purposes. And his face bespoke possibilities that were not pleasant to dwell upon. But one thing can save you now, he continued. Should you, in recognition of your remarkable valor, ferocity, and prowess, be considered by Tal Hajas as worthy of his service, you may be taken into the community and become a full-fledged Tharkian. Until we reach the headquarters of Tal Hajas, it is the will of Lord Quaspatomel that you be accorded the respect your acts have earned you. You will be treated by us as a Tharkian chieftain, but you must not forget that every chief who ranks you is responsible for your safe delivery to our mighty and most ferocious ruler. I am done. Especially a book from 1912. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've learned a few things about population and stuff since the 1900s, absolutely. And that's okay. I hear you, Tars Tarkas, I answered. As you know, I am not of Barsoom. Your ways are not my ways, and I can only act in the future as I have in the past, in accordance with the dictates of my conscience and guided by the standards of mine own people. If you will leave me alone, I will go in peace. But if not, let the individual Barsoomians with whom I must deal either respect my rights as a stranger among you, or take whatever consequences may befall. Of one thing let us be sure. Whatever may be your ultimate intentions towards this unfortunate young woman, whoever would offer her injury or insult in the future must figure on making a full accounting to me. I understand that you belittle all sentiments of generosity and kindliness, but I do not. And I can convince your most doughty warrior that these characteristics are not incompatible with an ability to fight. The so-called simple language of the Martians, the Green Martians. Ordinarily, I am not given to long speeches. Also, Princess of Mars is 100% in Isekai. Yeah, it absolutely is. Yes, it is. Good call, good call. Ordinarily, I am not given to long speeches, nor ever before had I descended to bombast. But I had guessed at the keynote which would strike an answering chord in the breasts of the Green Martians. Nor was I wrong. For my harangue evidently deeply impressed them, and their attitude toward me thereafter was still further respectful. Tars Tarkas himself seemed pleased with my reply, but his only comment was more or less enigmatical. And I think I know Tal Hajas, Jeddak of Thark. I now turned my attention to oh man, I thought I had this name in my brain. It's Dejah. Dejah Thoris, and assisted her to her feet. I turned with her toward the exit, ignoring her hovering guardian harpies as well as the inquiring glances of the chieftains. Was I not now a chieftain also? Well then, I would assume the responsibilities of one. They did not molest us, and so Deja Thoris, Princess of Helium, and John Carter, Gentleman of Virginia, followed by the faithful Woola, passed through the utter silence from the audience chamber of Lorquas Potomal, Jed among the Tharks of Barsoom. All the words mean all the things. So Farscape, if you're old enough to remember that show, the one where they had like the cosplay outfits and swords made out of foam. It was so silly. Yeah, I've seen it. I talked to the people who developed it at a convention once. Good people. They also did the Americanized versions of the end of Evangelion from Neon Genesis, which is kind of interesting to talk to those people. I think Tiffany Grant was the English voice actress for Asuka, and went and had lunch with her and the producer the producer for their organization, their group. So yeah, that was fun. I don't know how I got into communications with her. Like it was email or news groups. It was like so long ago. Yeah, I'm a little on the old side. That's right. It was fun. Farscape was it the first time that actress, who's the girl? Who one that showed up in Stargate, later offshoot series, made out with Daniel a lot. Black hair, pointy nose. She was also in Pitch Black. Was she? Okay. Pitch Black is the movie with Van Diesel, right? On the planet with gotta watch those movies again. Yeah, this is like, you've really triggered like 90% of my movie knowledge. I've like talked about all of it just now. Great targeting. The Riddick movies, yeah. First of the Riddick movies. Those are gnarly movies. Those are grim dark. Fuck. Hell yeah. All right. Where are we? Why don't we do ads? We have ads in 5 minutes, so we just trigger those and get them done now while we're between chapters. I think that's a fantastic idea. I'm going to stand up, move around a little bit, stretch, and we'll see you in 3. Okay, we are back. I think Valana's about to feed the kitty cats, so Gwen will be showing up in a little while. Alright, a little sip. Okay, chapter 11 with Deja Thoris. As we reached the open, perhaps the opening, the 2 female guards who had been detailed to watch over Deja Thoris hurried up and made as though to assume custody of her once more. The poor child shrank against me, and I felt her 2 little hands fold tightly over my arm. Waving the women away, I informed them that Sola would attend the captive hereafter. And I further warned Sarjoka that any more of her cruel attentions bestowed upon Deja Thoris would result in Sarjoka's sudden and painful demise. My threat was unfortunate and resulted in more harm than good to Deja Thoris, for, as I learned later, men do not kill women upon Mars, nor women men. So Sarjoka merely gave us an ugly look and departed to hatch up deviltries against us. I soon found Sola and explained to her that I wished her to guard Deja Thoris, as she had guarded me. That I wished her to find other quarters where they would not be molested by Sarjoka, and I finally informed her that I myself would take up my quarters among the men. Sola glanced at the accoutrements which were carried in my hand and slung across my shoulder. "You are a great chieftain now, John Carter," she said, "and I must do your bidding, though indeed I am glad to do it under any circumstances. The man whose metal you carry was young, but he was a great warrior, and had by his promotions and kills won his way close to the rank of Tarkas, who, as you know, is second to Lord Potomel only. You are 11th. There are but 10 chieftains in this community who rank you in prowess. And if I should kill Lord Potomel, I asked, you would be first, John Carter. But you may only win that honor by the will of the entire council that Lord Potomel meet you in combat, or should he attack you, you may kill him in self-defense and thus win first place. So that's like a contradiction to what's happened already. Like, you can go kill any of the other chieftains, but they have to agree to let you kill the chieftain. I laughed and changed the subject. I had no particular desire to kill Lord Potomel, and less to be Jed among the Thurks. I accompanied Sola and Deja Thoris in a search for new quarters, which we found in a building near the audience chamber and of far more pretentious architecture than our former habitation. We also found in this building real sleeping apartments with ancient beds of highly wrought metal swinging from enormous gold chains depending from the marble ceilings. The decoration of the walls was most elaborate, and, unlike the frescoes of the older buildings I had examined, portrayed many human figures in the compositions. These were of people like myself, and of a much lighter color than Deja Thoris. They were clad in graceful, flowing robes, highly ornamented with metal and jewels, and their luxuriant hair was of a beautiful golden and reddish bronze. The men were beardless, and only a few wore arms. The scenes depicted, for the most part, a fair-skinned, fair-haired people at play. Deja Thoris clasped her hands with an exclamation of rapture as she gazed upon these magnificent works of art, wrought by a people long extinct, while Sola, on the other hand, apparently did not see them. We decided to use this room, and on the second floor and overlooking the plaza for Deja Thoris and Sola, and another room adjoining and in the rear for the cooking and supplies. I then dispatched Sola to bring the bedding and such food and utensils as she might need, telling her that I would guard Deja Thoris until her return. As Sola departed, Deja Thoris turned to me with a faint smile. And where to, then, would your prisoner escape should you leave her, unless it was to follow you and crave your protection and ask your pardon for the cruel thoughts she has harbored against you these past few days? You are right, I answered. There is no escape for either of us unless we go together. I heard your challenge to the creature you call Tarkas, and I think I understand your position among these people. But what I cannot fathom is your statement that you are not of Barsoom. In the name of my first ancestor, then, she continued, where may you be from? You are like unto my people, and yet so unlike. You speak my language, and yet I heard you tell Tarkas that you had but learned it recently. All Barsoomians speak the same language from the ice-clad south to the ice-clad north, though their written languages differ. Only in the valley door, where the river Is empties into the lost sea of Chorus, is there supposed to be a different language spoken, and, except in the legends of our ancestors, there is no record of a Barsoomian returning up the river Is. Up the river Is from the shores of Chorus in the valley of Dor. Do not tell me that you have thus returned. They would kill you horribly anywhere upon the surface of Barsoom if that were true. Tell me it is not. Her eyes were filled with a strange, weird light. Her voice was pleading. Her little hands reached up upon my breast, were pressed against me as though to wring a denial from my very heart. I do not know your customs, Deja Thoris, but in my own Virginia, a gentleman does not lie to save himself. I am not of Dor. I have never seen the mysterious Is. The lost sea of Chorus is still lost, so far as I am concerned. Do you believe me? And then it struck me suddenly that I was very anxious that she should believe me. It was not that I feared the results which would follow a general belief that I had returned from the Barsoomian heaven or hell or whatever it was. Why was it then? Why should I care what she thought? 'Cause she's naked. She's naked, bro. That's why you care. I looked down at her, her beautiful face upturned and her wonderful eyes opening to the very depth of her soul. And as my eyes met hers, I knew why, and I shuddered. I shuddered for very personal reasons. A similar wave of feeling seemed to stir her. She drew away from me with a sigh, and with her earnest, beautiful face turned up to mine, she whispered, "I believe you, John Carter. I do not know what a gentleman is, nor have I ever heard before of Virginia, but on Barsoom no man lies." That's right, they're all such honest alphas up here. "If he does not wish to speak the truth, he is silent. Where is this Virginia, your country, John Carter?" she asked, and it seemed that this fair name of my fair land had never sounded more beautiful than as if it fell from those perfect lips on that far-gone day. "I am of another world," I answered, "the great planet Earth, which revolves about our common sun and next within the orbit of your Barsoom, which we know as Mars, because we name things better than you do." Yeah, if no one lies, how do you have a word for it? That's a damn good point. Yeah, it should be untruths. Yeah. How I came here, I cannot tell you, for I do not know, but here I am, and since my presence has permitted me to serve Deja Thoris, I am glad that I am here, for I am a nice guy with overwhelming powers that I do not even control or understand myself, etc. nauseum. Mostly nauseum. She gazed at me with troubled eyes, long and questioningly. That it was difficult to believe my statement I well knew, for I could hope that she would do so, however much I craved her confidence and respect. I would much rather not have told her anything of my accidents. It's almost like anecdotes, but it's accidents. But no man much rather have not told her anything of my... Hang on. I read the same accidents. But no man could look further into the depths of those and refuse her slightest behest. That's right. The women on Mars are the reason no men can lie, because they're too beautiful. Finally, she smiled, and rising said, "I shall have to believe, even though I cannot understand. I cannot readily perceive that you are not of the Barsoom of today. You are like us, yet different, which you've pointed out every single time you say that. But why should I trouble my poor head with such a problem? I am merely a woman. I do not need to be bothered with thinking thoughts. When my heart tells me that I believe because I wish to believe." Yep. He's a god and she's her religion. His religion. It was good logic. Objection. It was good logic. Good earthly feminine logic. Good logic. Good earthly feminine logic. That's a gentleman from the south for you. At least she has not devolved into hysterics. If it satisfied her, I certainly could pick no flaws in it. As a matter of fact, it was about the only kind of logic that could be brought to bear upon my problems. We fell into a general conversation then, asking and answering many questions on each side. She was curious to learn of the customs of my people and displayed a remarkable knowledge of events on Earth. When I questioned her closely on this seeming familiarity with earthly things, she laughed and cried out, "Why, every schoolboy on Barsoom knows the geography and much concerning the fauna and flora, as well as the history of your planet fully as well as Then how do you not know where he's from? Oh, excuse me. As well as the history of your planet, fully as well as of his own. And why would you? Like, here's the thing. In school, I was taught a lot about the places I was near, Canada or Australia, and little about the things that we were not near, i.e. Australia when I was in Canada, and Canada when I was in Australia. So there is no way that every boy, presumably women too, is that did the women go to school, possibly know more, or sorry, as much about Earth as they do about Mars? Maybe that explains it. If Deja Thar she was a boy, then she would be able to tell who John is. But because she's a girl, she doesn't get an education. Somehow she's just a diplomat, and of circumstance, and now that's why she doesn't know who John is or where he comes from. That's the only explanation. If we find out that the women are also educated, we're going to have to come up with a different logic. You were taught about Europe and the ancient cultures from that. Sure, I was taught about ancient cultures in Europe in general, but not nearly as much. You were taught more about your locality and your province and your country with more detail and attention to things that were important to your to what's around you, your culture, than you were about others, right? This honestly should be that way. It's mind you, it's been like 35 years since I've gone to grade school, so I don't know. Am I wrong? I doubt it. I'm never wrong, really. Earth is their ancient culture. Sure. And that's sure, but that's not what she said. She didn't as well, the history of your planet fully as well as his own, which would include a modern history, so fully as well as his own. I think maybe we can say really that's just an exaggeration, but I don't. Perhaps we will learn more if we keep reading. Can we not see everything which takes place upon Earth, as you call it, is not hanging there in the heavens? Is it not hanging there in the heavens in plain sight? Yeah, but I don't think you can see it that well, can you? Do they have really good telescopes, maybe? We know more about you than you do of us, then yeah. This baffled me, I must confess, fully as much as my statements had confounded her, and I told her so. She then explained in general the instruments her people had used and been perfecting for ages, which permitted them to throw upon a screen a perfect image of what is transpiring upon my planet and upon many of the stars. These pictures are so perfect in detail that they're 8K, I guess. They're ultra high def. When photographed and enlarged, objects no greater than a blade of grass may be distinctly recognized. I afterward, in helium, saw many of these pictures as well as the instruments which produced them. You're our Netflix. If then you are so familiar with earthly things, I asked, why is it that you do not recognize me as identical with the inhabitants of the planet? She smiled again, as one might in bored indulgence of a questioning child. Oh, we have our answer, and it is such a simple, obvious answer. Because, John Carter, she replied, nearly every planet and star having atmospheric conditions at all approaching those of Barsoom shows forms of animal life almost identical with you and me, and further, Earthmen, almost without exception, cover their bodies with strange, unsightly pieces of cloth, and their heads with hideous contraptions, the purpose of which we have been unable to conceive, while you, when found by the Tharkian warriors, were entirely undisfigured and unadorned. So because they wear hats, John was unidentifiable. Yeah, John was naked, but everyone on Earth, it was impossible to see that they have various colors of skin and faces and stuff, because humans are never naked. That's right. They don't go swimming in pools in bathing suits. They don't. There must have been nudist beaches back then, right? That's probably, like, I think they've been around forever. Like, that's in some places, right? Obviously. You've never been naked a day in your life. What about the day you were born, Clue? Did you come out with a little like parka or something? Born fully covered. One of those hats with the ears, the fuzzy ears to cover your ears. Oh dear. Your poor mother, fuck. Please send her my sympathies. Big puffer coat and all. I have a duster. Do you know what a duster is? Like what the cowboys wear? I have one of those. I love the coat, but it's, you gotta work like a cream into it. Makes it oily and greasy. It's kind of annoying. It's kind of really annoying to wear. You leave a residue in your hands. It's not nasty. It's just, you know, a little greasy, a little oily. Let's not say greasy. It's oily, right? It's mildly oily, and it gets in your hands. I guess moisturizing though. So it doesn't hurt. It doesn't adversely affect you. But yeah, it's good. Rather wear something else. But really cool coat. It's an amazing coat. Is it mink oil? Yeah, and like with like the collar and the way it goes down is like split in the back, so you can like walk around really easily, and they have little straps. And like basically you have two side flaps in the coat, right? And you have little straps where you can sort of, strap your legs in there. There's lots of leeway walking back and forth. There's literally no restriction to movement, but the coats are always in the right place to shed the water off of you. Then you wear like a sweater underneath and you're perfectly dry. Like your entire freaking body is dry, right? And you're warm. It's a great coat. I love it. I just can't really use it very much, or at all. Let's see. Because, John Carter, you were naked. The fact that you wore no ornaments is a strong proof of your unbarsumium origin, while the absence of grotesque coverings might cause a doubt as to your earthliness. I see. We have now justified why the damsel in distress is butt naked. It's perfectly reasonable. So it'll cover your legs when, yeah, it's originally so it'll cover your legs on a horseback, yeah. And so that when you mount the horse, you swing your leg over the horse's back, the coat will come with you. It won't just kind of like stay on that side of the horse. It's really clever. I don't ride horses. I then narrated the details of my departure from the earth, explaining that my body there lay fully clothed in all the, to her, strange garments of mundane dwellers. At this point, Sola returned with our meager belongings and her young Martian protege, who, of course, would have to share the quarters with us. The quarters with them. Sola asked us if we had had a visitor during her absence, and seemed much surprised when we answered in the negative. It seemed that as she had mounted the approach to the upper floors where our quarters were located, she had met Sarkoja descending. We decided that she must have been eavesdropping, but as we could recall nothing of importance that had passed between us, we dismissed the matter as of little consequence, merely promising ourselves to be warned to the utmost caution in the future. Deja, Thoris, and I then fell to examining the architecture and decorations of the beautiful chambers of the building we were occupying. It's like they're on a date to a museum. Yeah, only that he is from a different planet. Hey, but he's not from, like, coming back from hell or heaven or whatever, so the afterlife. She told me that these people had presumably flourished over 100,000 years before, so blink of an eye. They were the early progenitors of her race, but had mixed with the other with the other great race of early Martians who were very dark, almost black, and also with the reddish-yellow race which had flourished at the same time. These three great divisions of the higher Martians had been forced into a mighty alliance as the drying up of the Martian seas had compelled them to seek the comparatively few and always diminishing fertile areas, and to defend themselves under new conditions of life against the wild hordes of green men. Always the damn green men. Ages of close relationship and intermarrying had resulted in the race of red men, of which Deja Thoris was a fair and beautiful daughter. A descendant of, that's all you need to say. During the ages of hardships and incessant warring between their own various races as well as with the green men, and before they had fitted themselves to the changed conditions, much of the highest civilization and many of the arts of the fair-haired Martians had become lost. But the red race of today has reached a point where it feels that it is made up in new discoveries and in a more practical civilization for all that lies irretrievably buried with the ancient Barsumians beneath the countless intervening ages. These ancient Martians had been a highly cultivated and literary race, but during the vicissitudes Yes, we're going to leave it at that. Of those trying centuries of readjustment to new conditions, not only did their advancement and production cease entirely, but practically all their archives, records, and literature were lost. Deja Thoris related many interesting facts and legends concerning this lost race of noble and kindly people. They're the ancients from Stargate. She said that the city in which we were camped was supposed to have been a center of commerce and culture known as Kored. It had been built upon a beautiful natural harbor landlocked by magnificent hills. The little valley on the west of the city, she explained, was all that remained of the harbor, while the pass through the hills to the old sea bottom had been the channel through which the shipping passed up to the city's gates. The shores of the ancient seas were dotted with just such cities, and lesser ones in diminishing numbers were to be found converging toward the center of the oceans. As the people had found it necessary to follow the receding waters until necessity had forced upon them their ultimate salvation, the so-called Martian canals. We had been so engrossed in exploration of the building and our conversation that it was late in the afternoon before we realized it. We were brought back to a realization of our present conditions by a messenger bearing a summons from Lorquas Patamal, directing me to appear before him forthwith, bidding Deja Thoris and Sola farewell, and commanding Hula to remain on guard. I hastened to the audience chamber, where I found Lorquas Patamal and Tars Tarka seated upon the rostrum. Chapter 12. A Prisoner with Power. As I entered and saluted, Lorquas Patamal signaled me to advance. He probably doesn't know what a salute is. And, fixing his great, hideous eyes upon me, addressed me thus. You have been with us a few days, yet during that time you have, by your prowess, won a high position among us. Be that as it may, you are not one of us. You owe us no allegiance. Your position is a peculiar one, he continued. You are a prisoner, and yet you give commands which must be obeyed. You are an alien, and yet you are a Tharkian chieftain. You are a midget, and yet you can kill a mighty warrior with one blow of your fist. And now you are reported to have been plotting to escape with another prisoner of another race. A prisoner who, from her own admission, half believes you are returned from the Valley of Dor. Either one of these accusations, if proved, would be sufficient grounds for your execution. But we are a just people. and you shall have a trial on our return to Thark, if Tal Hajus so commands. But, he continued in his fierce guttural tones, if you run off with the red girl, it is I who shall have to account to Tal Hajus. It is I who shall have to face Tars Tarkas, and either demonstrate my right to command, or the metal from my dead carcass will go to a better man, for such is the custom of the Tharks. I have no quarrel with Tars Tarkas. Together we rule supreme, the greatest of the lesser communities among the green men. We do not wish to fight between ourselves, and so, if you were dead, John Carter, I should be glad. Under two conditions only, however, may you be killed by us without orders from Tal Hajus. In personal combat in self-defense, should you attack one of us, or were you apprehended in an attempt to escape. As a matter of justice, I must warn you that we only await one of these two excuses for ridding ourselves of so great a responsibility. The safe delivery of the red girl to Tal Hajus is of the greatest importance. Not in 1,000 years have the Tharks made such a capture. She is the granddaughter of the greatest of the Red Jedaks, who is also our bitterest enemy. I have spoken. The red girl told us that we were without the softer sentiments of humanity, but we are a just and truthful race. You may go. Turning, I left the audience chamber, Turning, I left the audience chamber. So this was the beginning of Sarkoja's persecution. I knew that none other could be responsible for this report, which had reached the ears of Lorquas Potamel so quickly, and now I recall those portions of our conversation which had touched upon escape and upon my origin. Sarkoja was, at this time, Tar Tarkas's oldest and most trusted female. As such, no one can speak a lie on this planet. How can you have a most trusted female? I guess most loyal would probably be a better way I would describe it. As such, she was a mighty power behind the throne, for no warrior had the confidence of Lord Quaspotamel to such an extent as did his ablest lieutenant, Tars Tarkas. However, instead of putting thoughts of possible escape from my mind, my audience with Lord Quaspotamel only served to center my every faculty upon this subject. Faculty on this subject. Now, more than before, the absolute necessity for escape, insofar as Deja Thoris was concerned, was impressed upon me. For I was convinced that some horrible fate awaited her at the headquarters of Tal Hajus. As described by Sola, this monster was the exaggerated personification of all the ages of cruelty, ferocity, and brutality from which he had descended. Cold, cunning, calculating. He was, also, in marked contrast to most of his fellows, a slave to that brute passion which the waning demands for procreation upon their dying planet has almost stilled in the Martian breast. You were told she was going to be tortured in public? Yeah, they're going to have fun with her. In brutal, savage fashion. Like a festival. The thought that the divine Deja Thoris might fall into the clutches of such an abysmal atavism started the cold sweat upon me. Far better that we save friendly bullets for ourselves at the last moment, as did those brave frontier women of my lost land, who took their own lives rather than fall into the hands of the Indian braves. That's just brutal and sad. As I wandered about the plaza, lost in my gloomy forebodings, Tars Tarkas approached me on his way from the audience chamber. His demeanor toward me was unchanged, and he greeted me as though we had not just parted a few moments before. "Where are your quarters, John Carter?" he asked. "I have selected none," I replied. It seemed best that I quartered either by myself or among the other warriors, and I was awaiting an opportunity to ask your advice, as you know. And I smiled. I am not yet familiar with all the customs of the Tharks. Come with me, he directed. And together we moved off across the plaza to a building which I was glad to see adjoined that occupied by Sola and her charges. My quarters are on the first floor of this building, he said, and the second floor is also fully occupied by warriors. But the third floor and the floors above are vacant. You may take your choice of these. I understand, he continued, that you have given up your woman to the Red Prisoner. Wait, given up your woman to the Red Prisoner? What the hell? He had a woman? I understand, he continued, that you have given up your woman to the Red Prisoner. Well, as you have said, your ways are not our ways. But you can fight well enough to do about as you please, and so, if you wish to give your woman to a captive, it is your own affair. But as a chieftain, you should have those to serve you. And in accordance with our customs, you may select any or all the females from the retinues of the chieftains whose metal you now wear. I thanked him, but assured him that I could get along very nicely without assistance, except in the matter of preparing food, and so he promised to send women to me for this purpose, and also for the care of my arms and the manufacture of my ammunition, which, he said, would be necessary. I suggested that they might also bring some of the sleeping silks and furs which belonged to me as spoils of combat, for the nights were cold and I had none of my own. He promised to do so and departed. Left alone, shouldn't someone from the people, the chieftain that you killed, be attending on you or something, rather than like the chieftain that captured you in the first place? That's kind of weird. Left alone, I ascended the winding corridor to the upper floors in search of suitable quarters. The beauties of the other buildings were repeated in this, and, as usual, I was soon lost in a tour of investigation and discovery, because I have to somehow fluff out the book. You would think if the women are his now, where are they? Yeah, basically. I finally chose a front room on the third floor, because this brought me nearer to Deja Thoris, whose apartment was on the second floor of the adjoining building, and it flashed upon me that I could rig up some means of communication whereby she might signal me in case she needed either my services or my protection. You should just go live there, bro. You know you want to. She's naked. Adjoining my sleeping apartments were baths, dressing rooms, and other sleeping and living apartments. In all, some 10 rooms on this floor. The windows of the back rooms overlooked an enormous court which formed the center of the square made by the buildings which faced the 4 contiguous streets, and which was now given over to the quartering of the various animals belonging to the warriors occupying the adjoining buildings. So you're taking like 10 rooms. Like a whole floor? Is that a whole floor? And all the other warriors who, like, they gotta share one floor. I'd be kind of pissed. I might be finding out if I could be a chieftain at this point. Whilst the court was entirely overgrown with the yellow, moss-like vegetation which blankets practically the entire surface of Mars, yet numerous fountains, statuary, benches, and pergola-like contraptions bore witness to the beauty which the court must have presented in bygone times, when graced by the fair-haired, laughing people whom stern and unalterable cosmetic laws had driven not only from their homes, but from all except the vague legends of their descendants. One could easily picture the gorgeous foliage of the luxuriant Martian vegetation which once filled this scene with life and color, the graceful figures of the beautiful women, the straight and handsome men, the straight men, of course, the happy, frolicking children, all sunlight, happiness, and peace. It was difficult to realize that they had gone, down through the ages of darkness, cruelty, and ignorance, until the hereditary instincts of culture and humanitarianism had risen ascendant once more in the final composite race which now is dominant upon Mars. My thoughts were cut short by the advent of several young females bearing loads of weapons, silks, furs, jewels, cooking utensils, and casks of food and drink, including considerable loot from the aircraft. All this, it seemed, had been the property of the 2 chieftains I had slain, and now, by the customs of the Tharks, it had become mine. At my direction, they placed the stuff in one of the back rooms, and then departed, only to return with the second load, which they advised me constituted the balance of my goods. On the second trip, they were accompanied by 10 or 15 other women and youths, who, it seemed, formed the retinues of the 2 chieftains. They were not their families, nor their wives, nor their servants. Their relationship was peculiar, and so unlike anything known to us that it is most difficult to describe. All property among the Green Martians is owned in common by the community, except the personal weapons, ornaments, and sleeping silks and furs of the individuals. These alone can one claim undisputed right to, nor may he accumulate more of these than are required for his actual needs. Oh my God, if we could do that here on Earth, that would solve so many problems. Yeah, kind of like pseudo-communists, I guess. It's kind of like, I guess, the necessary things that we all need to survive, because we're going to die if we don't share them, need to be shared. But then some things you can just own yourself as long as you need them. If we could do that with bank accounts and money, oh man, would life just get... It would solve a lot, or at least in part, a lot of problems. For sure. The surplus he holds merely as custodian, and it is passed on to the younger members of the community as necessity demands. The women and children of a man's retinue may be likened to a military unit, for which he is responsible in various ways, and in matters of instruction, discipline, sustenance, and the exigencies of their continual roamings and their unending strife with other communities, and with the Red Martians. His women are in no sense wives. The Green Martians use no word corresponding in meaning with this earthly word. Their mating is a matter of community interest solely, and is directed without reference to natural selection. The council of chieftains of each community control the matter as surely as the owner of a Kentucky racing and stud directs the scientific breeding of his stock for the improvement of the whole. In theory, it may sound well, as is often the case with theories, but the results of ages of this unnatural practice, coupled with the community interest in the offspring being held paramount to that of the mother, is shown in the cold, cruel creatures and their gloomy, loveless, mirthless existence. It is true that the Green Martians are absolutely virtuous, both men and women, with the exception of such degenerates as Tal Hajas, but better far a finer balance of human characteristics, even at the expense of a slight and occasional loss of chastity. Finding that I must assume responsibility for these creatures, whether I would or not, I made the best of it and directed them to find quarters on the upper floors, leaving the 3rd floor to me. One of the girls I charged with the duties of my simple cuisine, and directed the others to take up the various activities which had formerly constituted their vocations. Thereafter, I saw little of them, nor did I care to. I got a retinue. I told them to do the things. Now it's a passive income, right? It's like Black Desert Online has a passive income. You get a bunch of assets, you hire a bunch of people, you tell them what to do, and every so often they give you ammunition. Yes, I think that's what's happening here. Yep. Why can't you have your other 2 whammons in this area? They got to be in this other house? That's crazy. Sola or Sola and Tharj and Deja and Sola. You have this other fucking community around you all of a sudden in these vast apartments. You have a whole floor to yourself. You can park them in there. Come on, bro. Don't be a jerk. That said, let's see, we are 9:38. We're between chapters. Oh, this one's called Lovemaking on Mars. I'm definitely holding that for Monday. Yep. You're going to have to come back next week for chapter 13, Lovemaking on Mars. Love is actually a type of ammunition, I bet. I bet it's not even an emotion. Yeah, take that. Haha. Yeah, we'll cut there. It's a little early. The chapters are pretty well are fairly short compared to some of the wild, crazy, radically different length chapters we have in some books. So we're pretty solid, but I think we got more than half an hour per chapter. I think we did 10 chapters, right? We started at chapter 4, and we got to chapter 12. So no, that's like 8, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Open next week with Lovemaking on Mars. Awesome. Yeah, we'll do that. It's a pretty wild book. Clue, it's a lot of it is from, yeah, it's from, right, it's like, it's set just after the Civil War, right? And our fellow John Carter, he is, he was on the losing side of that. He was officer or something, and he brings a lot of that with him. Oh yeah, there was a movie called John Carter, wasn't there? Yeah. yeah, right. Clearly, wasn't there a movie? Yeah. I got echoed here. This is the book. Yeah. Maybe we should go watch the movie, see like how much of the racism has been filtered. Because I bet you a lot of the racism has been filtered, right? And there's a lot of it. This is wild. Have you finished your second run through Resident Evil? Have you done that yet? You getting all your? Are you advancing towards 100%? God, I've never wanted 100% a movie before. It's kind of crazy. And by movie, I mean a game. Space Marines 2 is kind of the first one I've even tried. You're doing a run tomorrow? Oh, good luck with that tomorrow. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna have to find a person to raid. Thinks. You think he thinks? It'd be nice if I could find a person who's there's actually some people writing and reading. Oh, let's actually click same category because we have a good go-to though. We have a good go-to. Oh, no way, really? That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, raid message. Thank you. We're going to raid. We are. We will go raiding. I promise. Yeah, it's made by Disney. Yeah. Oh man, it's going to be nothing but the most noble of noble spirit of all time, right? Yeah. Okay, the person I was about to raid is actually raiding out, so if I was quick, I could grab her, but I don't think I will. Another person, please. Option other. Actually, sounds really, really mean. Here. This is the flavor of this book. Yeah, it is the flavor of the book. That's like kind of the unfortunate thing. A lot of the books we read, right? They're all old books from old cultures that just have these attitudes in, right? They're actually kind of horrible. And we come across that occasionally, and we call it out. I'll call it out for sure. I'm not interested in supporting, obviously, racism and crap, but and this is only the first in the Mars series. Well, maybe we have more we can lean on if we ever run out of content. Like, it's not a bad book though. It's nice. It's pretty easy to read. It doesn't get too damn elaborate or crazy with like the words. We've only canceled 1 or 2 words out of the entire series so far. So, yeah. What do we have? Like, it's let's see, canceled word list. I think is it. We have we only have 3 canceled words. Because we had to start over again. There's a few out there that should be canceled, but we have to reread some books to find them again, I'm sure. So, yeah. Anyways. Cool.